Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Conor.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio. It's February 28th. Dennis Schrader here with Kasper Rosalowski on a week of craziness in the MMA world, which just started with Anderson Silva versus Michael Bisping. Cass, I mean, so many exciting things happening in MMA right now. How good is it to be doing Submission Radio?
Oh, unbelievable. There is so much to talk about. Even before Anderson Silva and Michael Bisping, UFC London, there was UFC 196. The columns and everything that supported that event were shook when RDA pulled out and everything that went down. There was a fancy press conference. Somebody was selected. Obviously, Nate Diaz, everybody knows now. But there is a lot to talk about. So this show is going to be an interesting one. We're, of course, going to be breaking down the event that just happened, UFC London. But we're also going to be talking about UFC 196, kind of like a preview show. Not really breaking down the card per se, but we'll be making sense of everything that's happened.
That's right, a pretty stacked show and some great guests on this episode that we're excited to bring to you guys. First up, we'll have Richard Perez, obviously Nate Diaz's boxing coach. He's actually sort of an unsung hero. He's been around Nate Diaz for a really, really long time, and Nick Diaz as well, so we'll be talking to him about this big, big matchup. Following him, we'll have none other than Ken Shamrock. Now, there's a lot of controversy around what happened between him and Royce Gracie last weekend in Bellator. Excited to have Ken on and sort of set the record straight and see what happens next. And also, finally, the man that we love having on the program, Bas Rutten's going to come on. We're going to be talking to him about UFC 196. I mean, we really need to hear his perspective. I'm really excited to hear what he thinks is going to happen in the fight and get his opinion. And also, there's a couple of other things we want to talk about. Kevin Randleman obviously passed away. They fought each other. They sort of knew each other, were pretty close. Get his best memory of Kevin and also talk about some of the stuff that's been going on. So, a pretty exciting show, Cass.
Yeah, well, I mean, Bas Rutten had a crazy interview with Mayhem Miller, right? So we got to talk about that. And it's kind of like, I mean, UFC 196, everybody said that this is the show that's overshadowing UFC London, and it's kind of going to overshadow this episode as well. We'll be breaking down UFC London, but it's like a UFC 196 sandwich. So we got Richard Perez first. Obviously, we're going to be talking about Nate Diaz. Then we got Ken Shamrock. Then we got Bas Rutten. So we're going back to UFC 196, and then we got UFC London Breakdown, and then we're going back to UFC 196 to cap off the show. So it's a big episode. It's pretty stacked. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to break down, and we're going to get into it pretty much straight away. Before we do, just a little bit of tiny housekeeping. We have gotten some really, really nice reviews on iTunes from you guys and other places like TuneIn and Stitcher and SoundCloud. Keep those coming in. We really appreciate them. I think pretty much, I don't want to challenge anyone here, but pretty much all of them have been 5 stars. So you give us whatever you think we're worth, whatever stars you think we deserve. But I'm just saying the trend is good because we'll be getting 5 stars and we hope to keep that up. So give us your honest opinion, give us a review. It really helps the show and obviously shows your support. Follow us on Twitter at SubmissionAUS. Follow us on Facebook, which is completely different from the Twitter, which is mainly gift-filled. And our Facebook is at Submission Radio AUS.
The other thing to remember, guys, is Submission Radio's Technique of the Week, which comes out once a week. We've got some fun ones with Anthony Perosh. And I think the good thing about these ones, Cass, is because they're quite basic. So they're very good for the beginners in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu who are looking to sort of pick up a couple of tips and take them to class with them, a couple of things that they might be doing wrong. So check them out. They're at our YouTube channel. It's at youtube.com/Submission Radio AU. But without further ado, Cass, we've got our first guest on the line, and I believe you're about to introduce him.
All right, guys. Our next guest has been the man behind the striking of 2 of MMA's most notorious brothers, the Diaz brothers. He will be helping prepare Nate Diaz for his fight against Conor McGregor at UFC 196. He is none other than Richard Perez. Richard, welcome back to the program. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
So the last few days, Richard, must have been a whirlwind for everybody in Team Diaz. As a coach, what goes through your mind when one of your students tells you they have a fight coming up on 10 days' notice, especially such a huge, high-profile fight at such a big event?
What I do is I just get focused, and he gets focused, and we just start training. I mean, he's been training anyway, so it's not, I mean, it's, even though it's a 10-day notice or 2 weeks, whatever it is, he's been training, so we just pick it up a little higher in the notch, you know what I mean?
Gotcha. Talk to us about that training. You say he's been training. What kind of training has been doing, and for how long?
Oh, he's always training. Nathan, he's always training. So it's not. I mean, he come to the gym and he work on boxing. He'll go do jiu-jitsu. He'll run. But not steadily because, I mean, he does more jiu-jitsu steadily and running than anything else. And then when it comes to boxing, then he gets serious.
Well, I mean, with Conor McGregor's last opponents withdrawing from fights, was there much of a surprise on your part when you guys found out that Nate would be fighting Conor at this event?
Well, I was hoping they'd fight right after when he fought Aldo, but it didn't happen. Mm-hmm. So, because that's the people they want to watch that fight, McGregor and Nate. So it wasn't a surprise. I mean, I was waiting for it.
When was the first time that you seriously heard Nate saying that he might fight Conor McGregor and that it would actually be booked? Was it in the last few days, or did you hear anything prior to that?
Well, he called me about 4 days ago and let me know, and they were going to call him back, and they did. So it was like 3 days ago.
What was that conversation like? When he calls you up, take us through that. What did he say?
He just called me and said, Rich, I'm fighting McGregor. I said, all right. And I said, what weight? And he said, well, I don't know yet. We'll find out. So when he came back, it was 170. I said, all right, that's better for you.
Well, the fight is, like we mentioned, in a week and is set to be at 170 pounds. Can you tell us what kind of weight is Nate currently sitting on?
He's right there, 171, 170.
Well, there you go. So he's got no issue, obviously, making the weight. And that's been a big topic discussed surrounding this fight, the weight itself. Nate claims that he agreed to fight at 155 from the beginning. Realistically, do you think it would have been possible for him to make 155 in that week?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he knowing Nathan, yeah. Yeah. But I like it better now that he's more comfortable. So, for me anyway, but for him, yeah, he would have done it.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I mean, talk us through that, Richard, because like you mentioned, you prefer the 170. What are some of the benefits of Nate fighting at 170? Is it to do with the fact that he'll have more time to train and game plan for the fight and not so much time focusing on losing the weight?
Yeah, because he's not fighting weight. When you're cutting weight, you're fighting yourself already. So he's fine now. He's just focusing on training and getting it done and getting it over with. That's what we're doing, and that's what I'm doing. I'm just focusing on with him, and every day we just train every day.
So basically now Nate actually has a very small but nevertheless a little bit of time to actually train for this fight, as opposed to just trying to struggle with the weight. With that tiny amount of time to prove. I guess take us through what you'll be focusing on with him during the next week. Talk us through what Nate's daily training schedule will look like.
Well, he just, jiu-jitsu, boxing, kickboxing, that's what he's going to be focusing on.
Well, it is one of those things that only a very small handful of fighters can prepare for such a big fight with so little time. In all honesty, do you think this will be an issue for Nate to take this fight on such short notice? Because we have seen guys like Chad Mendes struggle. Obviously he wasn't in shape, and it was one of the downfalls against Conor McGregor. Here we have a Conor McGregor who's in shape. How much of an issue is this lack of time going to be for Nate in this fight, in your opinion?
Okay, but what weight were they fighting at?
145.
This was 145, so he would have had to cut some weight. Yeah.
So he was trying to cut the weight. Mm-hmm. See, that's a big difference. I mean, sure, 2 weeks' notice is pretty short, but I mean, as far as the weight too, that helps a lot.
Right.
It makes a big difference. Believe me, because when you're cutting weight, you're fighting yourself already. You in 2 weeks it's a loss. You have to really struggle. But when you're not, then you're fine. He's still got 2 weeks. He's got to focus on it, and we'll see what happens when you get in the ring and see, how good it is. But, we just got to focus on that and not stress out on it. Just do it.
It's often hard to get a read on Nate and, what's going through his mind at certain times. How's he been since this fight got announced? What kind of temperament has he been in?
No, we're just focusing. There's no temperament or anything. We're just focusing on training. That's how me and Nathan have a relationship. When it comes to training, we train. That's all there is to it. We don't talk about, oh man, we don't worry about nothing. We just get in and do it. That's the name of the game, and that's the way to do it. Stay focused, stay strong, mentally, physically.
Well, speaking of staying focused, there was obviously a lot of trash talk at the press conference between Nate and Conor. Nate's never faced anybody so vocal, and it's usually Nate who's been the one to get inside his opponent's head. What has it been like after the press event? Did he seem affected at all by Conor's trash talking?
Oh, he loves it. It just builds Nathan up. It just pumps him up more.
Do you think he feeds off it? Someone like a Conor McGregor saying all those personal things to him. Do you think he feeds off it during the fight?
Oh, heck yeah. I've seen it before where he gets all pumped up and, like Cowboy and it was, I can't remember the guy's name. I mean, he gets all pumped up into it, The Cowboy was, flipping him off and telling him all kinds of stuff, and it just made Nathan just more hyper, more pumped up to doing it.
Is it true that with Nate, the only time that I don't want to say loses focus, but I guess let's say loses focus, the only time when that happens is when he's not really interested in the opponent, and then when he's got someone who makes it personal, it sort of helps him fight better?
Well, I don't know about that. I just know that either way, it doesn't bother him. You know what I mean? It doesn't bother him either way because like I say, it's a mental game and it's a physical game, and if you don't have that mental up there, then you're going to lose it. And he has it.
Well, speaking of the comments made at the press conference, Conor himself claimed that Nate's ring generalship and ring control are amateurish. What do you make of those comments?
Well, of course he's going to say stuff like that. He's trying to get to Nathan's head. That's all. That's all he's doing. It's just a game, a mental game. That's what he's trying to do.
I guess with Conor, he sort of believes that there's truth behind everything that he says. Do you think it's just trash talk, or do you think he's trying to get at something specific about Nate?
It's trash talk. I mean, everybody trash talks, and McGregor is good at it, and so is Nathan. So, but when it comes to the fight, he can't talk to him. You got to use your body. So we'll see what happens.
Well, Nate made some comments during the press conference. He said everyone's on steroids, the whole UFC, everyone. What do you make from those comments? Because to a lot of people, it just seemed like something that slipped out. Do you think it's something that he stands behind, and is that something that you and him believe?
Oh, I sure do believe that. Heck yeah, some guys they get busted, and to be honest with you, I know McGregor's got to be on some kind of steroids. He's pretty big, and then all of a sudden jumping to 170. Yeah, there's no way, because I mean he was supposed to be fighting at 155. So if you think about it, he was focusing on training at 155. He only had 2 weeks to go, and all of a sudden he's going to jump to 170. So no, there's something going on, but still, I mean we're still going to fight, and that's all there is to it.
Well, obviously, there's been some things with weigh-ins in the past of the Diaz brothers. Obviously, GSP didn't make weight against Nate Diaz, that sort of thing. Is there anything else that stands out about Conor McGregor to you that makes you believe that he may be on steroids, apart from the fact that he is moving up weight?
Well, when Nathan mentioned it to him, he got defensive. He got angry. Mm-hmm. If somebody would have told me that I was fighting, he told me you're on steroids, I would laugh. I said, yeah, give me some more steroids. Heck yeah. Sure. But he got defensive and mad. I'm not on steroids. I'm not. He's like trying to defend himself. So that just his actions and the way he talked is there's something behind that.
It's interesting, and you know what? That's been a huge discussion point, leading up into this fight, and everyone's sort of been putting their psychologist hat on and discussing that reaction. I mean, as far as him being so big, which is something that people have been talking about, you wouldn't think it's anything to do with the fact that he's not going to 145 anymore, and he just doesn't have to cut that amount of weight anymore?
Well, all I know is that he was supposed to fight at 155, and for some reason I don't think he would have made the weight, because he was trying to go to 165 when he went to 170. So think about it. If you see that, you would think he had 2 more weeks to go. He would be close to 155 and stay on that, or go to 160. But he didn't. He jumped to 170. So that's kind of shady right there.
Well, those are without a shadow of a doubt some interesting accusations by you, Richard, and I just want to clarify them with you. So in your opinion, because obviously Conor McGregor accused Nate of not being able to make 155 pounds, Nate Diaz confirmed that he was able to make 155, and you're saying the same thing now. So in your opinion, you think it was in fact Conor McGregor that wasn't able to make the weight, and that's the reason why the fight is scheduled at 170 pounds? Right,
that's what I'm saying, that McGregor couldn't make the weight, because he would have said, okay, let's go to 160 or let's go to 155, because Nathan was ready for it. And he didn't. So he jumped to 170. Why? I mean, 2 weeks to go, and if you're a fighter and you've been training for 2 months or so, and then you're already cutting your weight down, so 2 weeks you should be close to 155, at least 5 pounds over. No. So all of a sudden, 55 to 70. Oh boy, that's a big jump. So there's something fishy going on there. But it's all right,
Yeah, let's talk about the actual matchup in itself. Like you mentioned, McGregor does say a lot of comments. Most recently, he said Nate is flat-footed. He has repetitive motions that are predictable for him, and he plans on hurting him early and making him pay after that. What would you say Nate's advantages are in this fight, especially in the striking department?
Well, the thing is, the striking department, Nathan's a lot better when he's in good shape and not injured or anything. So when it comes to the night of the fight, McGregor's going to be shocked.
Right, and Nate is definitely not injured, and he is going almost 100% into this one.
Oh yeah.
You've trained Nate since he was a teenager, and trained him for all the opponents. When you look at McGregor, what do you make of him as an opponent? Is he the most dangerous striker Nate's ever faced?
Well, McGregor's a good striker. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he's not, but Nathan's better. I mean, when Nathan's on his game plan, he'll make him look silly.
Well, I'm sure you don't pay much attention to this, but a lot of people are looking at this fight stylistically as very favorable for Conor. Does it surprise you, and what do you think about that consensus?
Well, they're saying that because it's 2-week notice, which is normal. I mean, any fighter that comes out with a 2-week notice, the chances are, it's against him. But if he's training hard and he can go out there and do what he always does good, it'll be a good fight.
Take us into your mind, because you say if Nate's on his game, he'll make Conor McGregor look silly. How do you visualize the fight going in just a week?
It'd probably go the distance. I'm saying it'd go the distance,
Right. So you are seeing this as something that's going to end up in the hands of the judges? Probably. And do you believe, what areas do you believe Nate will dominate Conor in this one?
Striking.
Okay.
If he gets in the ground too, because McGregor, I mean, if he's on the ground, he just wants to strike. He's not good at, setting up triangles or choke or anything. He's not that good at jiu-jitsu like Nathan is.
Obviously, one of the clear advantages you would think Nate would have would be the ground game. Do you think he'll take it to the ground, or do you think he'll keep it standing?
Well, if he can get to the ground, yeah. But if not, then he's going to stand. You just can't. I can't say he's going to, because then if McGregor's going to keep moving around and he can't get to him, then it's not going to go to the ground. So he's going to have to strike.
Nate's brother Nick is currently serving a suspension for marijuana courtesy of the Nevada Athletic Commission. Has there been any talk between you and Nate about marijuana use leading into this fight? It seems to be something a lot of fans are worried about, specifically to avoid, failing a drug test, because, the Diaz brothers have been known to smoke a little bit of marijuana here and there.
No, I'm not worried about it.
Even on such a short notice with 1 week, you believe that's enough for Diaz to sort of get everything out of his system?
Well, I don't get into personal business, so I don't know if he was doing it or not. But he doesn't seem like he's worried about it. He's training like he's going to fight. So if it did, then he would have said something. But he didn't say anything to me.
Sure. Richard, we really appreciate the time you're giving us. We've got 2 final questions before we let you go. Just something that we wanted to touch on. We mentioned Nick. The last time we spoke to you, you mentioned that you stopped training Nick because of some money discrepancy from the GSP fight. Just wondering for an update, how is your relationship with Nick these days? Are you back training with him at all?
No.
Right, okay. So we won't be seeing Richard Perez cornering any Nick Diaz fights anytime soon?
I can't say. You give me a question that I can't answer.
That's fine.
For sure. But that's good, because it gives an opportunity that maybe in the future something will happen. Now, Richard, before we do let you go, final question. We have to know, how is the gym doing? I mean, we hear nothing but good things about Richard Perez boxing. Apart from Nate Diaz, who are some of the other fighters in the gym? And for fans around the area, how can they pop in and sort of do a bit of a workout with Richard Perez?
Well, I have some amateur kids that are doing really good. And I need to get a bigger place now. This is it's getting really packed. So I guess I'm doing something good.
It's a good problem to have when you need to upsize. So we're glad to hear that. Richard, of course, you're representing the 209, much like Nate Diaz. And you can catch Nate Diaz take on Conor McGregor at UFC 196 on March 5th. It's going to be the 6th in Australia. And, of course, Richard, you will be in Nate's corner. You can check out Richard Perez Boxing on Facebook or richardperezboxing.com for more information, specifically on how you can train with Richard. Richard, thank you so much for taking the time chatting with us today. And good luck next weekend. Really appreciate it.
And thank you for calling. Appreciate it.
Hi, this is Conor Nelson, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Our next guest is a legend and pioneer in both MMA and pro wrestling. He most recently took a controversial loss at Bellator 149 after the referee missed a low blow which affected the outcome of the fight. It's always a pleasure to welcome back Ken Shamrock to Submission Radio. Ken, welcome to the program.
Hey, listen, thank you, guys. I appreciate you having me on.
No, of course. We always like having you on. And before there's a lot to talk about, obviously. Before we get into your fight and break down the controversy, we just want to get your thoughts on a few things that happened early that night, as well as the event in general. Let's talk about the ratings for Bellator 149. Obviously, already the numbers are indicating that it was a huge success viewer-wise. What did you think when you saw how well it did on Spike?
I expected it. I truly did. I've been a part of a lot of different organizations with different fighters and been able to push those numbers up above record-breaking numbers. And I really do have to, I have to give that all credit to the fans that have followed me over the years, because they truly have made this possible. Without them, we don't break them records. We don't get the viewership. So I've always wanted my fans to know how much I appreciate them, and now it's paying off. And for that, I'm thankful for them. Thank you so much.
Well, apart from the controversy surrounding your fight, the other big thing taken away from the event was the horrible fight between Kimbo Slice and Data 5000. I'm just wondering, Ken, what did you make of that fight?
I'm a little bit different than most people, because I think that you've got two different types of people that watch this fight. And on the first half, the ones that you're hearing loud and clear are your hardcore MMA sports writers and hardcore MMA fighters and hardcore MMA fans. They're not going to like that fight. But there's a reason why Kimbo Slice is breaking record numbers also when he goes out there. Many people want to watch him. It's not because he's a skilled fighter, because we all know he's not. He's just the guy that likes to throw big hands, and he gets tired, and he gasses, and he's done. But nothing has changed since he first stepped in the ring. So I'm not quite sure what the criticism is here, with people screaming and yelling, saying it was a horrible fight, this or that. And I think to myself, when they promoted the fight was promoted as a Miami beef from the streets, and it was two street fighters. And that's exactly what it was. And I heard some people say, that's not a street fight, man. Street fights are better than that. No, they're not. You may now and again get a tough guy that happens to be an athlete. That's different. But I'm talking about two guys on the street, two thugs on the street going after one another. If one guy doesn't knock the other guy out after a minute or 30 seconds even, it becomes a real slugfest, a slobber knocker where nobody's in shape. They're falling over each other. Someone's trying to get position on the other one. That's exactly what it was. I didn't look for any more skill sets or any punch combination. I looked for a straight up tough man contest, and that's what I got. So I didn't go in thinking anything that it wasn't. And I think that most of the fans that are not hardcore fans, they watched it and they were entertained. But like I said, you've got two sides here. You got people that know MMA, and you got people that don't know MMA, but they're fans and they like to watch. And they're going to love what Kimbo did. I promise you that. And that's why they keep coming to watch him fight. So I get it, man. And towards the end, it got a little rough to watch. But we got what was it promoted as. It was a street fight. If you looked at it like that, you got what you want.
It's actually a very solid argument there. And actually, there's some fascinating points, Ken. Now, moving on to your fight, there was obviously a lot of fans who were looking forward to your fight with Royce Gracie. It was a chance to finally get some closure on your previous two fights. However, there wasn't much of a resolution. Before we even get to the groin shot, tell us how you felt in the cage that night, and what was your analysis of the fight up to that point, before the groin shot happened?
Going into the fight, I wanted to make a statement. The whole week of the fight, I wanted to make a statement to the fans, to Royce Gracie, to everybody, that this was a fight between two legends, and that the respect should be paid by both sides. Because the grudges and the things that we were trying to do early on in our career to make a name for ourselves, we're not doing that. We're not top-ranked fighters. We're older fighters who enjoy competing and having fun at it. And I wanted to make sure this didn't turn into a bad thing, because after the fight was over, win, lose, or draw, I wanted to make sure when we walked out of that ring, me and Royce Gracie had squashed our differences, even move on in life. So when we go to do appearances and different types of get-togethers with MMA, that we are friends from that point. And so you could see me shaking his hands at weigh-ins and shaking his hands at different interviews, because I wanted to set the standard that yeah, this is about us going in there and finishing our legacy, but it's not about us going in and trying to start anything that isn't going to do any of us any good. Let's go out champions. Let's go out and walk away from this friends. And I did that all the way up to the fight. And it's pretty disappointing considering that was what I wanted to do, and then I got some issues with his integrity now. I mean, when I fought Royce Gracie the first time in Denver, Colorado, I was in a fight with him, and he got a gi choke on me. And I remember he let go. The referee didn't stop the fight, but he let go because I tapped. Well, the referee said, no, keep fighting. Royce Gracie stood up and said, no, you tapped. You tapped. And I looked up at Royce, I looked at the referee, and I wanted to lie. I wanted to say, no, I didn't. But out came my mouth was, yes, I tapped. And I couldn't believe I said it, although it was the right thing to do. And so here we are 23 years later with the same kind of thing, with some integrity that a fighter has to step up. Royce Gracie has to step up and say, yes, I did knee him in the groin. I did foul him. We should do this again. But no, I get the other side of this thing where he's trying to fight in every way he can to deny it. And to me, that is not a good thing for him. He needs to step up, just like I did in the first fight, and admitted to it, because I could have gone on. The referee said, keep fighting. I could have said, no, I didn't tap. And then, of course, the replay would have showed I did. Just as we are right here and now. Where's his integrity?
Now, before the groin shot even happened, would you have to ask you, Ken, how did it feel being in the cage with him which almost happened 21 years ago? Did you feel like you were fighting a different fighter, or did you have largely the same feeling stepping in the cage with him for the third time?
Well, again, like I said, when we went into this fight, we knew we had different things that we could do with Royce. I felt like I could probably gone anywhere with him, but that's just my opinion. But Guy Metzger set up a game plan that we were going to force Royce Gracie to go where he doesn't want to go, and that's keep him on his feet, because nobody can take me down. I mean, I all through our training, nobody could actually take me down. And we were punching. Guys were trying to take me down. Fresh guys coming every 2.5 minutes. I'd be punching him, try to take me down. I'd defend it. I'd strike him. I'd counter him. And that was our plan, was to bring Royce Gracie into deep waters like he said he was going to do to me. The only thing is he wanted to bring it into the third round and go to the ground. He thought we were going to be on the ground. I made him stand up, and I used my footwork to cut the ring off, to put constant pressure on him, making him throw all these weird things that he does, making him work hard. And then when he starts to run out of room or gets frustrated or gets a little tired, he would force a clinch or shoot. And that's exactly what he did. Once we clinched, that's when I realized, and I know he did, that's when I realized that he doesn't have a chance to win this fight, because he was so weak. He had nothing. And I was literally going, I'm going to kill this guy. And, of course, then the blow, I wasn't moving. I wasn't dancing around. I hit him in the face with a knee. Immediately after that, he's looking right, if you look at the replay, he's looking right down at my groin. And I'm not moving. I'm not dancing around. And he throws a knee directly into my groin with absolutely no care where it lands.
So let me ask you, because we've rewatched that replay multiple times. It's one thing that I personally didn't notice, that he was looking at the groin. And I know when it happened, you said he did it on purpose, and then afterwards you said you apologized. What's your stance now? Do you think it was on purpose, or do you think it was just careless? What do you think was behind it?
When it first happened in the ring, the reason why I jumped up and I was so angry was because we've never had that issue before, and we were actually in a clinch, and I wasn't moving around, and he actually, when he threw the knee, it wasn't even upward, it was straight. And it wasn't like I was moving side to side or going back and forth. I was standing right in front of him. So when he threw it and I went down, I was like, in my mind, I was like, there's no way he did that up. There's no way he did that by accident. No way. And so I jumped up and I got angry, but then I held myself, because I thought, you know what? I don't know that for sure. And so I put myself in check, and I apologized for that, because I didn't know for sure. The reason why I've taken the stance at this point right now is because of the way he's acting. The way that he's satisfied with getting that win. Because anybody that does that by accident would step up and say, you know what, you're right, we need a rematch. That was definitely a low blow. I apologize. Let's do another one. But he's not doing that. He's running with the win. He is running with this win.
Before we get to Royce's comments, because he has made some comments after the fight, let me ask you, how hard was the knee that he hit you to the groin with, and how much did it affect you?
Well, when it first landed, it stung. I mean, it literally stung, and it froze me for a second because I was like, okay, that just hit me in the groin. And then all of a sudden, here comes the aching, man, right into my sack. It was like, it just took the wind out of me. I mean, it bent me over. And what I had figured out when I was going down is that my jump was actually pinned between the cup and my skin. So I was trying the whole time, even after the fight, I'm trying to push it down, and I couldn't tell whether or not everything was where it was supposed to be. So it was, like I said, it was a good shot. It was definitely a good shot. I've been punched, and I've been kicked there before, and I've never gone down. This one here bent me over.
Was there any point, Ken, where you thought about motioning to the referee and letting him know that you got hit low, or did it all just kind of happen too fast?
If you watched the replay, you didn't watch it closely, because you can tell when the referee's over the top of me, I'm screaming at me, you need me in the groin.
No, but yeah, at that point, it kind of seemed like it was too late. Like, you were on the ground, I guess the referee didn't see it, but like, when you guys were in the clinch, was there any moment there where you thought, because it was a bit of a delayed reaction, was there any moment there where you thought about signaling to the ref?
At that moment, I was literally trying to, one, stay in the fight, and then two, when the pain set in, it literally, I wasn't thinking of anything. I was thinking of protecting myself.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you were very vocal about your disappointment with referee Montalvo, but after the fight, now it's sort of a week removed. How do you feel about his performance in the stoppage? Are you still pretty upset at his performance as a referee in that fight?
No, I'm not upset at him. I'm upset. Never mind. Let me explain. I'm not upset at him because he missed the call, because everybody makes mistakes. Everybody. And so it's okay when that happens. The problem that I'm frustrated with, and I just don't know what it is, maybe it's because the commissions are tying his hands, that he can't say anything. I don't know. But what's frustrating is I can always be the one to say what I do wrong in different fights. You know, like, yeah, that was my bad. I should have done this or that. Apologize. But it seems like there's faults elsewhere that lies within these situations, and that nobody wants to poke their head up and say, yeah, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. That's the thing that bothers me the most, is that it's not that the mistake was made, because it happens. That's not the issue. The issue is, how come we can't get people to just go, yes, I made a mistake, we'll fix it. Boom, that's it. But we're making this thing like it's some big ordeal. And like, oh my goodness, he should be put in front of a firing squad. No, it was a missed friggin' call. That's it. Just fix it.
You've made it clear that you're definitely not upset with the ref. Obviously, you know, now going back to Royce Gracie's comments, he spoke to MMA Fighting, and he said that his knee did not catch your groin, and he's very happy because that was obviously his first knockout. And even after the fight, he was kind of waving his finger, sort of signaling that, you know, he didn't agree that he hit you in the groin. What are your thoughts on Royce's comments?
You know, I can't control what Royce does. You know what? He gets to do what he wants to do, and then let people judge him. I can't, I'm not going to argue that, because I know what happened. He knows what happened. And I just cannot believe, after all these years and all the stuff that we've helped build, that this is in integrity. This is how he wants to go out. It's by lying and cheating. Come on, man.
You said you had a conversation with him backstage. Obviously, you know, you said it was on purpose, and then you guys clarified it. Can you tell us what exactly you guys talked about backstage? And did you discuss, did you say anything to him about, like, you hit me in the groin? Did he deny it? Was there anything like that?
No, we didn't really have a discussion backstage. We had the discussion in the ring.
So let's talk about what happens now. In the pre-fight press conference, somebody asked you if you saw a scenario where the two of you will fight again, and you said that once this fight happened, it's done. Nobody really could have predicted this outcome. What's happening next? What would you like? What would be the perfect scenario for you that you'd like to see happen from here on out?
Well, what I'd like to see is that the commission to overturn the ruling, because you can't award a guy a win on a foul. And I think it's pretty clear that I was hit below the belt. Forget what side you stand on or what you think is fair or this or that. Did it hit me below the belt? Yes. You're not a judge. You cannot tell me. You weren't in my body, so no one can tell me about how much it hurt or whether or not hitting the right. But was it below the belt? Yes. Did it incapacitate me enough to be able to not defend myself? Yes. If those are the scenarios, then you must overturn this fight and give the ruling a no. Well, I don't think they could do a no contest, but they could definitely turn the decision over and make it a no contest. Like it didn't. There's no ruling. But I also would like to add that if Royce Gracie doesn't fight and he just tries to walk away after there's no contest, I want them to award the fight to me, because what I'm saying is I need something that's going to press Royce Gracie to fight. Because if it's just a no contest, then Royce Gracie will just walk away, because he doesn't want to get in the ring with me. Like, not now. I mean, look what he did now. Look what he did to get out of the ring. So to get him back in the ring, it's going to have to be something that's going to push him to get in the ring. And I think by giving him a loss, if he has to take a loss, he'll get in the ring.
Well, there's a very real possibility Royce Gracie may not agree to fighting you again. What would your reaction be if Royce denies your request, and your trilogy ended on such a sour note?
If Royce Gracie goes, I don't want to fight Ken Shamrock, but that doesn't have anything to do with the commission. This is just Royce Gracie.
Right.
If Royce Gracie says, I don't want to fight Ken Shamrock anymore, there's nothing else I could do. But I don't want to hear this, no, I won, no, it's over. That I don't want to hear. What I want to hear is I don't want to fight you.
Would you sort of take solace in that? I mean, I guess you obviously want to fight him. You're calling him out in a sense, and if he's saying he doesn't want to fight you, I mean, I guess you could sort of take it as backing down. Would you take any solace in that? Like, not to say that you've won, but in the end, he's the one who didn't want to fight you.
Well, I mean, obviously, it doesn't do anything for the record. What I want to see happen is I want that fight overturned. And then, if they overturn the fight and there's no win there, and then he says, I don't want to fight you, then I could take solace in that, even though I want to fight the guy. But if he says he doesn't want to fight, then I can't force him to fight. I can't make him fight. I don't know what his situation is. But what I don't want him to do is say, I don't want to fight you, and then he gets a win.
Mm.
Since you've returned to active competition, you've been going after old rivals like Kimball and Royce and seemingly looking to tie up loose ends and close chapters. It doesn't really seem like you may be getting the vindication that you might be looking for. Is there any part of you that regrets coming out of retirement for this Royce fight?
Not at all. No way. I mean, obviously there's a frustration there, but I can't look back and go, man, I just wish I had done that, because I can't change it. I can't. I mean, there's so many fans out there that I was able to entertain and be able to have some great moments. If I look back on it, there are parts that piss me off. I mean, let's just say there's replay, right? Mm-hmm. I'm 2-0 in Bellator. If there is instant replay, I'm 2-0 in Bellator. Because then they'll replay the Kimball fight, see that he reached out and tapped. Oh, yeah, he didn't tap hard. He touched the mat. Oh, so now we're going to split atoms now. Whether he tapped or he didn't tap, it's whether how hard he taps. No, if a guy motions to tap, he can't allow him to try to fake people out, because that's not part of the strategy. He either tapped, he didn't tap. And if you look at the replay, he tapped. So you tell me. I mean, yeah, it's frustrating. Big time frustrating. But you know what? I would do it all over again. I don't know. I hope that the results would be different. But I came out of retirement because I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to challenge myself and continue to keep having fun. And I did that. But you know what? There's some disappointments now. But again, that's life. We deal with it. We just got to figure it out as we go. All I could do right now, all I have control over right now, is going through the proper steps, filing the paperwork. Hopefully the things will get done right, and we'll get the rematch. We'll see what happens. I don't have control of anything else.
Right. Well, yeah, Scott Coker's the man who is in control to make this fight happen. Did you speak with Scott at all, and has he given you any indication that he'd like to make this fight happen again?
I know I have a business partner, Gus Woodruff, who's been speaking with him. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, my attorney, Rod Donohue, who was dealing with the legal issues with the commission of the no contest or no whatever they're going to call it. So I try to stay away from that because I'm too emotionally attached to it. So I don't want to be saying or doing anything that I would regret. So I'm allowing just the people that that's their job. That's what they do. I'll let them handle it.
Well, just curious, Ken, how many fights do you have left with the Bellator? Was it just a 2-fight contract, or do you still have another fight guaranteed?
No, it was definitely a one fight each time. I know that they had some rights to being able to write first rights of refusal. So, but listen, I probably got one fight left in me, and that's what we were planning on. We had some options in other places and options with Bellator. So, this fight didn't end the way it should have for the fans or for myself. But, listen, I just know this, is that I got to focus on Royce Gracie right now. And there's nothing else that I really want to do up to this point. That's all I want. But nothing else matters. And I want that.
It's interesting that you mention that, because obviously if the fight would have gone properly and maybe you would have won, would you think that would probably be it for you and you would have officially retired?
No, I think I would have had one more fight after that. But now that I've gone through the training camp, I got in the ring with Royce, ended the way it did, I mean, that used up one of my fights. I mean, it's like, the fight's not the hard part, it's the training and being away from your family. That's the hard part. And my family and myself had planned on a certain time limit that we would get these 2 fights in, and that time limit is coming up quick.
Ken, we really appreciate the time you're giving us, and we'll wrap up in just a moment. We've just got 2 more questions before we let you go. One of them, sort of on a side note, we read a story in an article by Jeremy Botter of Bleacher Report that apparently former UFC fighter Mark Hall was handing out flyers at the Dave & Buster's Fan Fest detailing why a fight between you and him makes sense. I'm just wondering if you heard about this and know why he would want to fight you so badly.
Yeah, I can explain it to you, but it's pretty dumb. I mean, it was childish. It was childish on my part. I lost my temper. But Mark Hall, he's an idiot. But anyways, I was at an event, and people were telling Mark Hall was looking for me. He was pissed off about something that I had said or done. I don't remember. So I told him, I said, all right, I'll be there. So I get there, and Mark Hall comes up with a bunch of his buddies. There's like 3 of them that are behind him. And he's walking up, and I'm in the hallway where the bathroom is in this venue place. And as he's walking up, he's saying that he's going to kill me or beat me up, or I don't want to use these words, but really just going off. And I'm thinking, I'm looking at him, I'm going, well, what is this guy say? What is he doing? I mean, what did I do to him? And he's like, yeah. He started screaming and yelling, and of course, then Vernon and a lot of these other guys die, and a bunch of guys that were there, Eddie Millis, they all cut off the guys that were walking behind, whatever his name is, walking behind him. And so he's walking by himself, and he still thinks he's got all his buddies behind him. And I looked at him, I said, dude, you got no backup. And he turned around and looked, and then all of a sudden he balled up his fist, and he went to take a swing at me, and I clocked him. I lit him up. And the ambulance came and picked him up and took him to the hospital. Then he tried to sue me. And, of course, they threw that out of court. So that's the issue. I didn't even recognize this guy when he came up. I was like, who are you? I mean, you get these guys that come out of the woodwork, and sometimes they get through the, security or something, and they get to speak their mind or something. But the same thing at Dave & Buster's, they kicked him out. I mean, they literally blew him off the property because he was sitting there trying to sell little figures and passing out flyers, and people were like, who are you?
Wow. So he came up to you. What did he say when he came up to you? Did he just give you a flyer, or what happened?
Yeah, he signed something at me. It had my head, like, I don't even know what it was, but I know it was some director. We had my head. It had been chopped off or something. And I looked at him, and I said, did I do something to you? And he goes, it's Mark Hall. And I went, oh. I said, what are you doing here, man? And then of course, that's when all the guys pushed him away and got him out of there, because I don't need to put that guy in the hospital again. Is he an idiot or what? I mean, it's like you already put a guy in the hospital when he comes up, tries to fight you. A guy walks up to you, balls up just like he's going to hit you, goes to swing at you. You light him up, and then he says you cheap shot at him. I was like, oh, so you're supposed to land the first punch before you get a hit back.
Wow, what an interesting story, Ken. Now, before we let you go, we have to know, what's the time frame for when you'd like a perfect scenario where you'd come back and fight again? Obviously, if the commission does overturn it, or if Scott Coker and Royce Gracie agrees to this fight happening again, how soon could we see you back fighting?
Well, I would like to see it, anywhere from a 3 to a 4 month turnaround on this thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it all depends. You know, it all depends on how fast the commission gets through this, on how fast we can get this rematch. And again, we got a couple things we got to get around. First of all, we got to get around the commission, and hopefully that they will come up and say, "Hey, we're going to do this. You guys can go and do it again. We'll overturn this." And then to get Royce Gracie to say that he'll get back in the ring with me. That's the big obstacles right there.
Well, it's interesting, and we can't wait to see how it all plays out. Guys, you can keep an eye on all of Ken's updates via Twitter, @ShamrockKen. Ken, thank you so much for coming back onto the program and chatting with us, and best of luck securing another fight with Royce.
I appreciate it. Also, too, I want to let people know how they can get a hold of me on all my social media sites, KenShamrock.com. If you go on there and you look on there, there's a little Easter egg on my site. You got to find it because it's in a small spot. But once you find it, it opens up a secret door, and you get to come in and check out all my pictures and videos and stuff that I don't have posted there for everybody. So you get to kind of get into this secret family. So check it out, KenShamrock.com. Look, it's in a small place. Find that Easter egg, man, and come join the family.
Hi guys, it's Joanna Jędrzejczyk, UFC strawweight champion. Listen to Submission Radio.
Alright guys, our next guest is an MMA legend. You can check him out in his new awesome podcast, Rutten and Ranallo, as well as once a week on Inside MMA. It's a pleasure to welcome back the one and only El Guapo, Bas Rutten of Submission Radio. Bas, it's always a pleasure. Welcome back to the program.
Hey, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Now, Baz, before we get into the craziness of the latest MMA news, we have to wish you a happy birthday. I mean, How could we not? A legend like yourself. Happy birthday from the whole team here at Submission Radio. Tell us, how were your birthday celebrations?
You know, it was really bad for me because I was in bed pretty much. I had to do the podcast the day before I got the flu. I had it from my daughter, and it was a bad one. That day I was crushed, and then the next day, you know, I was still under the weather, but I had to shoot the podcast, and today I'm kind of getting over it. So it's good. Now it's good. We're going to have to celebrate next Wednesday, and that's when we go out to dinner with the family.
That's good. That's nice. Well, obviously, you know, you're working hard on the podcast. You and Mauro Ranallo, how's that all going? Give us the update. How are you finding it? Because you've been doing it for a while now.
Yeah, Rutten and Ranallo is the show. We started on the 7th this year. So we're only like the 8th podcast is going to come out today. Mm-hmm. It's been really great. I mean, everything is looking really well. I went on the Joe Rogan podcast, and that really bumped us. And we did a tribute for Kevin Randleman. That got a lot of views. So it's good. People really seem to like it. A lot of people simply didn't know. So that's why I thought, you know, let's go on Joe Rogan's podcast, which is a big one. And a sure thing, man. I mean, the next day we were number 2 in our what is it, area, sports and recreation, of course, not in total. Mm-hmm. And the day after we were like number 1. And I understand these are moments, but you know, you take it as a new podcast, you go, oh, that's pretty cool.
Obviously. And now that you're on Submission Radio, I mean, you should probably go to number 1. That's what we'd expect. But
that's it. Stay there for a long time.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, let's be honest. I think it's probably just the delayed reaction from our interview before the Rogan podcast that got you up to that list. But now, in all seriousness, though, me and Casper love doing podcasts. Obviously, it's a chance to get your thoughts out to the people. It's sort of more casual. Now that you and Mauro are more settled in, what can fans expect from future episodes? What do you guys have cooking up?
You know, we got to talk to everybody. This Steve Simone, we talked to him. Steve Simone this week. He's a comedian. You know, so we talk to athletes. We talk to pretty much everybody. We're going to have actors on. Holt McCallany. He's got some great news. He's once you know him, then you go, oh, that's that guy. He's in pretty much every movie. He's a good friend of the show. Also, just anybody who could be interesting and see what we can pull out of these guys that could help people. That's what it's all about, right? See if we can help each other.
I love it. You guys aren't just doing like MMA guests. You're doing everybody, doing comedians. Joe Rogan is going to be wondering where all his viewers have gone. They're all going to be watching Rutten and Ranallo, and we are too. Now, something we got to get to sort of business. Something else that drew our eye this past week was your and Kenny Rice's interview on Inside MMA with Jason Mayhem Miller. For those who haven't seen it, Miller basically wasn't really having any of it. He wasn't answering any questions, and he was acting in a strange manner. And I mean, stranger than usual. Me and Dennis have some, you know, tough interviews in the past, but nothing like that. What did you make of the interview?
You know, I couldn't understand it. I simply didn't understand it. Before the show, he was okay. You know, when he came in and we met everybody. Then I didn't see him for a bit. He was in another room. but talked to his entourage. He had a whole bunch of guys with him. And everybody was nice, even Matt Horowitz was there. So that was fun to catch up with that guy. He's always funny to talk to. And I don't know. It just and after the show, he asked Kenny, for what I understand, he said, do you think it was too much? So it was totally an act, but I didn't get it. I go, like, what are you trying to, to get here? If you didn't fight for a long time, the reason that you fight is, money maybe, right? Why would you fight again, right? So let's say if it is money, why would you do something like this that will pretty much close every door to every sponsor? You would think that you would do something else, but it's it get people talked about. That's the thing, but I don't know if it's good for him.
Well, yeah, it's one of those things where people who watched it were pretty disappointed at Miller's lack of respect for you and Kenny in the interview. I mean, me and Casper, for example, we do a bunch of interviews. We do a lot of interviews every week. And, sometimes people contact us and they'll say, we're a little bit disappointed because when you see a guy like Mayhem Miller, you sort of do look forward to finding out what he's been up to. When you see him acting that kind of way, no one really gets much out of the interview. I'm just wondering, what was going through your mind as you kept asking him questions and you just sort of kept ignoring them?
Well, first of all, it was exactly what you said. We heard the whole thing, and it was a DUI, and so, and we're not guys who go into that right away. We want the best for him because we know he has a problem. He knows he has a problem. So once it started, what do you think every time he gives an answer? You think the next he will come by, because a lot of guys do that. For the only person who never did that, or who didn't break character, was Renato Aranja, of course, and at the same time was George Bonetti was there also. He played like a punch drunk boxer, and that was because that was his, that was him. But Jason, I thought, he's going to be crazy in the beginning. That's what fighters sometimes do when they're uncomfortable. They do a little crazy, it breaks the ice, and then boom, we shoot into the real interview. But after you start flipping off the presidents or future and past presidents, you start. I go, now you're pushing it. Why would you do that? It's so unnecessary. And it's like I said, if it brings him money in his pocket, well, all power to him. I have no problem with it. But I simply don't think that was good for him anywhere, financially or just fan-wise.
Did a part of you sort of feel like, what are we doing here? This is a bit of a waste of everyone's time?
Yeah, of course. That's it's what you think. You want to help a guy like that. Like you said, that's our intention. Was our intention, but if they don't take it like that, and and everything before was normal, so it's not like we could have seen it coming because he was really weird in the green room where we were waiting. No, if everything was okay. So well, I hope it's going to be okay though.
Oh, we do too. Just sort of finally on Mayhem Miller, obviously he's fighting at Venetor in Italy. I know it's kind of hard to ask because you didn't really get much from the interview, but do you think he's back for good, or is it just kind of a publicity stunt? He'll do one fight and then, get some money and disappear again? Yeah,
you see that? I really don't know. I think it is maybe an attempt to straighten out his life. I mean, that was pretty much with me, but when I took the last fight also was for me. I like to drink, I like to do, and I go, what, if I take this fight, it will straighten me out right away. So that's why it was one of the reasons. Plus, it was always burning in me. I had no injuries, and I go, oh man, I'm actually feeling good. Let's try this out. So I'm hoping that is something for him as well. But, I don't know. If you're by yourself and with all that pressure, then if you lose, what happens then? It's always fun when you win. But what if you do it for those reasons and you lose, and then it could backfire even more. So I don't know. What I do know is that he's an incredible, talented guy. I trained with him, and in your gym, he's a very hard guy to beat. If his talent would shine like he has in the gym, if he can pull that out during the fight, he's a really good guy.
No, it's a definite shame. And obviously, bully beatdown. He's got a lot of skills in a lot of areas. It's a shame to see that people aren't able to enjoy them at the moment. But let's move on to another subject. I mean, the big news this week is obviously the massive fight because Rafael Dos Anjos wasn't able to compete at UFC 196 and got replaced with Nate Diaz. We have to ask you, Bas, what was your preferred choice as the replacement opponent for McGregor? Was Nate Diaz it?
Preferred that Frankie Edgar, but apparently he said no. But then I heard from Frankie that's what they said on the internet, that he said yes. So I don't know what's going on there. This moving up 2 weight classes is kind of cool, and to fight another crap talker, like Nate Diaz. He does it a different way, though. I think McGregor is more, how I say it, well thought what he puts together in crap talking. I think he's really smart with that. But I think it will get a lot of eyeballs, and especially moving up 2 weight classes. Both there are southpaws. So I think there's going to be a war of words inside an octagon, and then, of course, a fight on top of it.
Well, yeah, you mentioned McGregor's now fighting 2 weight classes above his championship weight. It's crazy stuff, and it's kind of unprecedented. Do you think making such a big jump is a dangerous move for him?
No, not right now. Not the week of 10 days, how many days he knew before. It's because now he has enough time, and his body can he's going to be very strong. He's going to come in like nothing happened. I mean, he doesn't need to diet now. He was talking about steak all day long, but now he can do steak and pastas all day long. I mean, he can eat pretty much whatever he wants to make a welterweight.
In the past, you've mentioned that you do enjoy a good conspiracy theory, so we'll throw one at you, because just before we got you on, we spoke to Richard Perez, Nate Diaz's boxing coach, and his theory, he said a few interesting things. One of them was that he believes McGregor is on steroids. The other thing is that he said he believes it was McGregor who couldn't make the weight. Because obviously Nate Diaz said, I'm fine to go to 155, I can make the weight. And apparently Nate is on 170 at the moment. But apparently Richard Perez thinks that Conor McGregor was the one who couldn't make the weight, and that's why it's going to go to 170. What do you think of that?
Well, then it should go further down, that conspiracy theory. Then you should go, is RDA really injured? Right?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Right, yeah. So, yeah.
Do you think he's injured?
Yes, I do think that he's injured. I think this is too small of a world. Everybody's going to find out. Yeah. It really is. Trust me. I mean, I was just thinking about the Pride Fighting Championships at the time with Coleman and Takada. There was going to be a fixed fight. Well, these people from Pride actually faxed a fax to the first potential opponent for Takada, and they put in the fax what they were planning to do and how Takada should win. So that was with Joe Moreira. He got that, his gym got that fax, and he started faxing it to everybody,
Wow.
Among the fighters. So you go, a thing like that, I truly believe it will come out.
You haven't got any faxes, have you?
No. Everybody in the gym needs to be in on it. You see what I mean? If there's one person not in on it, or one person says, it's not true, boom, it's going to collapse.
I mean, in all seriousness, like I believe Dos Anjos is injured. I think most people do. But what do you think about that theory that it was Conor who, I don't know, maybe he ate too many steaks, and maybe he was the one who, maybe he's the reason why this fight's at 170, not so much Nate Diaz.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think he could have made it easy, because it's already a heavier weight class for him. Maybe he overshot. That's possible too, that he thought, I could do. But then, they have to get rid of RDA first, and that's a big problem in this whole conspiracy, because, like I said, too many people would know that. So I don't think so.
Sure, and just to clarify, I wasn't saying that the RDA injury is fake. I just meant, like, once RDA is injured, the fight, obviously they can do it with Nate at 155 or 170, but they've chosen 170. But that's a good point though, because if he wasn't going to make it against RDA, that's a good point.
Yeah, well, while we're on the topic, Bas, I mean, Nate did make some comments in that press conference about guys in the UFC being on steroids. I mean, how much attention do you think people should pay to that comment? Do you think it was an accidental slip, or do you think it's really something that his camp believes? Because Perez, we spoke to Perez just before, and he says that they do believe it.
Yeah, but everybody's getting tested now, and they have all these people show up every time. It's very hard now to cheat. So I don't believe it. I believe in once a guy is caught, then we have proof. Before that, you can't really never say, and some guys, they really look like it, you can tell, and then they get clipped later on. You go like, yeah, well, that was a no-brainer. Everybody kind of knew that. But, I don't know. No, McGregor, to me, it doesn't look like it to me. And he doesn't seem to me to be that guy who does that. I think he's mentally so strong, he doesn't need that. That's what I always said with the steroids. It is good to use. Trust me, it's good to not when you're competing. But if you have an injury, you want to recoup faster. The doctor says it's going to be 3 months instead of 6 months. By all means, do it. Just make sure it's out of your system. Don't have anything against. They never killed anybody. They only helped people. If you really think about it, if you really break it down, it only helped people. That's alcohol and drugs. That's what the other things do. But if you do it correctly, should help a person. So I think that once you start fighting and you use steroids, I think something's mentally, you're already giving up. You're already figuring other people are stronger than me. I need to be stronger. There's something mentally wrong. And I don't think a real fighter should be like that. And I think that Conor McGregor, in his mind, he's a true fighter.
Well, give us a prediction and break the fight down for us if you can. Who wins between McGregor and Diaz, and how are you expecting this fight to play out?
Yeah, that's going to be the big question. I think McGregor could do it because his hands are just better. Diaz he's got good boxing, but more crisp is the McGregor side. Diaz, though, with all the submissions he has, way more submissions than I think 11 submissions and 4 knockouts, for I believe. We did something about it yesterday. So if he can get the fight to the ground, can he do something on the ground with it? Maybe ground and pound into submission, something like that. But that's only based on that one loss, that the last loss he had, against Joe Murphy, that he got submitted. Well, everybody got submitted who doesn't understand the ground game. I got submitted. After my last loss, I got angry and I vowed never to lose anymore, started training for it, and never did. So maybe McGregor is exactly the same. It was in 2010. We're talking about almost 6 years ago. And it's just simply no more. And that's where the focus shifted to the ground. And now he's equally good in both areas, only he didn't show the ground yet. Because if you look at the Mendes fight, people say, yeah, he took him down and he didn't even try to get up. I was exactly one of those people. But then you hear later from Dana White that he said before the fight, he says, I will knock Mendes out in the second round. So now with that conspiracy theory, there's another one back for you. You go thinking, okay, wait a minute. So you think he was on the ground just like showing Lorenzo and Dana like, here, I'm not doing anything. I'm just going to wait till they put me back up and I'm going to knock him out in a second. I don't want to do anything. And then he knocked him out in a second. So we don't know now if these are mind games or not. And we're going to have to figure it out. And I hope that Diaz is in great shape, that he had a full training camp.
Yeah, he definitely won't get a full training camp, but from what Richard Perez says, he was training prior to this. It's not like he was sort of sitting around doing nothing. Just, you mentioned about, obviously, the ground game. Do you think it'll go to the ground, though? Because it kind of seems like neither guy will really want to get it there. And, I don't know, like, Diaz not really known for his wrestling. He's not like a Chad Mendes. Do you think it'll go to the ground at all?
I know. I know what the people think, but yeah, I think the smartest idea for Diaz is to try to see if he can take it to the ground. I truly believe. He's better there. This record shows it also. So he's a tough guy. I'm not saying that. But in boxing-wise, I think McGregor just is a little crisper. And he will beat him there. And I go, if you know that you're at... Okay, we don't know where his level, McGregor's levels, are on the ground. But what we do know is that his striking is really good. So it's up to you. You want to fight against a really good striker, or you say, you know what, let's take him to that area that in the past he has lost to. He might be very good, but we don't know that. It's not checked out yet. Let's check that out. Let's see if we can get him on the ground. And I know McGregor has great takedown defense, but once in the middle of a brawl and you start bouncing, you start hitting, if at that moment in the middle of a slugfest, Diaz decides, hey, shoot in, he might pull off a takedown. And if that happens with like 2-3 minutes left in the round, then we can really see what Conor can do on the ground.
It's all very interesting. Final sort of question is, so it sounds to me, Bas, like you're putting your pick behind McGregor. Is that right? You're going with McGregor in this one.
Yeah, I truly believe so. I think even with the welterweight, I think mentally he's just too strong in his striking, and he puts everything. He's a smart guy in everything he does. So and Nate Diaz, although he's training, and I understand that, but still it's a last minute replacement, and if it goes to the ground, we don't know. But otherwise, I would say McGregor. If I had to put money on it, I would put it on McGregor.
Finally, Buzz, before we let you go, obviously it was you mentioned it before, but it was a very, very sad day in MMA when legend Kevin Randleman passed away. We know you and Kevin were friends and, of course, fought in the past. Before we finish up, can you give us, we're not going to touch into it, much because obviously you and Mora did a fantastic job on Mora and, Rutten and Ranallo, but before we finish up, can you give us your favorite Kevin Randleman story, from your many years around each other?
Well, I said it. I told this story a few times because it was so funny, and I don't think that many other fighters have that. We literally met in the elevator, both of us by ourselves, and the door locks, and we're both looking in the reflection of the door, and I see him smirking, and I start laughing, and I look at him, I turn my face to him, and I go, "Well, I guess good luck tomorrow," and he smiles and he says, "Yeah, thank you very much. You too." I go, "Okay, I appreciate that." And then he goes, "If you keep your feet on the floor, I promise not to take you down." And I go, "Really? Yeah, okay. Well, we'll see." And the door opens and we split ways. And then in the fight, it was so funny because he's moving and the first thing he does, he slaps his thigh, his left thigh with his left hand, like telling me, "Give me a low kick. Try to low kick me." So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to fake it. I'm going to fake like I'm giving him a low kick. And I last minute, so I make a round kick with my leg. And then last minute, I turn it into a front kick. I did this with a bunch of fighters in Pancras, and it's really effective. But I thought that if Kevin, since he's the wrestler, he's going to expect now that I'm going to give him a low kick. So he's going to shoot in. So at the moment he shoots in and I kick him in the face, that could be the end of the fight. So those were my thoughts. And then when I made that front kick suddenly, he backed away. And that kind of threw my whole game plan off because I wasn't supposed to kick. But suddenly he backed away and I said, "Oh, wait a minute, he's backing away. He's not going into me when I kick." And that was a mistake because then I gave him a left kick and he shot right away and he had me on the ground. So, and then the next day after that, I'm banged up. My face beyond recognition. It's literally because before I go out, Walid Ismail, I heard him tell the story like a couple of years ago to somebody. And when I heard him tell the story, I realized, that was kind of crazy what I was doing. So what happened was my face was so bashed in. And at that time, nobody ever told me that you can't blow your nose or put pressure on your nose, blow your nose, because otherwise everything will blow up in your face. So I did that, of course, because everything was full of blood and I needed to clear my nose. And man, my face was so thick. So all my buddies go, "Hey, you can't go out anymore." Now, I was drinking Heineken's already because they came to bring it into the dressing room, I remember. And I go, "Oh, man," but I had a doctor with me. So I go to the doctor. I said, "Doctor, give me the syringe with the widest needle." And she goes, "Okay." So she look, and he comes back and I go to the mirror and I stab my underneath where everything is thick. I stab the syringe in and I start sucking everything out. I do it at both eyes and above my eyes, and it works. It's like, man, this is the craziest thing. So I put my shades on and I walk away. And when I heard Walid say it was so funny. He goes, "This guy, he stabs a syringe in his face. He starts, then he puts on shades like the Terminator, and he walks out. Let's go party," he said. I go, "Yeah." When you hear it like that, it's like it's more real. But at that time, I just wanted to have a good time. But anyway, that was my face. And Kevin, the next day when I saw him, he had a hoodie, and he pulled off his hoodie, and he showed me all these little stitches he had in the top of his head from my elbows. And he goes, "Dude, look at my hat. Look what you did." I said, "Look at your hat." "Look at my face, dude." Everybody can see me. You put on a hoodie and nobody can tell it. I look like a maniac. So I thought that was funny for our first meeting. And then, of course, but like I said on Rutten and Ronaldo, the show, he got me the name El Wapo. He started with it. It was Tina Shamrock, the ex-wife from Ken Shamrock, who explained to me, we were talking about the movie The Three Amigos. I asked her, what does El Wapo mean? And she said, the handsome. And I go, "Oh, that's so funny because the El Wapo, the bad guy in the movie, is such an ugly guy. And they call him El Wapo." So, and then when there was a breakfast in Japan in a hotel, and once Kevin and Coleman stood up, it was Kevin who said, "Hey, Wapo, see you later." And that was it. This day, everybody started calling me Wapo.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, just a legend that passed way too soon. And what a great memory, Bas. Now, thank you so much for coming on the program. We know you're a busy man, and we really appreciate your time. Guys, you have to check out Bas's excellent O2 trainer at www.o2trainer.com. And also, everybody needs to check out his brand new T-shirt at Roots of Fight. Now, everybody knows his original one because pretty much anybody who's anybody wore it around. This new one, even better. It looks awesome. Make sure to grab it now at rootsoffight.com. And finally, of course, if you don't follow the man on Twitter, you're doing something wrong. His Twitter is at Bas Rutten MMA. Bas, again, thank you so much for coming on the program. It's always a wealth of knowledge talking to you.
Very welcome, guys. Thank you very much. Godspeed. Talk to you soon.
Absolutely. I'm sure it will be soon. Don't really need much of a reason to get Bas Rutten on the show. He's always fun to have on. There's always plenty of stuff to talk about, right, Dennis?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things. We have him on very, very frequently, but no one seems to mind because every time, like you mentioned, he comes on, it's just a wealth of knowledge and so much to talk about. There's a few personalities in MMA, and Bas is definitely one of those guys where fans just need to hear his opinion on all that's happening in MMA. And we're much like the fans as well. We love hearing him talk. So such a pleasure having him on.
Well, a legend in pro wrestling, obviously Ric Flair, all wrestling fans will know him. Anyone else won't. But there's an old saying, he was such a good wrestler, he could have a wrestling match with a broomstick and still make it entertaining. And Bas Rutten's kind of like that as far as MMA and obviously giving his thoughts. He can talk about anything and still be entertaining. So, I mean, he's not even a Submission Radio alumni at this point. He's like a cornerstone of Submission Radio. I mean, he does. There's like an office here, a Submission Radio, a Bas Rutten office. I mean, it doesn't get used because we're in Australia. He's over there, but it pretty much should be here. Anyway, there is a lot to talk about. UFC Fight Night 84. Silva versus Bisping. We're going to be doing it a little bit differently. We're going to be taking a bit of a different approach because afterwards we're going to be talking about UFC 196, sort of like a preview show. Not so much a preview show of the card, not so much predictions or anything like that, but just our reaction to the craziness that happened last week with obviously Nate Diaz pulling it. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. We've got to talk about UFC 184, so we're going to sort of mention a few things, and then we're going to get into sort of the nitty-gritty, the meat of it. I believe the last 2-3 fights, which is what everybody wants to hear about, Musashi Lady, Silva Bisping, and obviously Tom Breeze Nakamura. So, just obviously the card started. Awesome starts of the card with 2 exciting finishes. Then came the heavyweights. Big surprise. Who the hell thought we'd see a fight end via short hook to the balls? I mean, they say heavyweights have stoppage power. There we go. Scott Askham scored an amazing walkaway head kick KO at the end of the first round. And by the way, it's a card worth rewatching, and I'll sort of tell you, I guess, the main things that you want to check out because there were some great finishes. Marquand Americani, Mr. Finland, outgrappled Mike Wilkinson to a decision in a fight that he and his coach, John Kavanagh, thought he'd finish in the first round. And it's the first time in the UFC that he's gone to a decision. To be honest, he looked pretty tired in the third. And then we get to Brad Pickett. I told you this is going to be quick. Brad Pickett and Francisco Rivera. And I just want to say, before we start actually breaking things down, I'm really happy for Brad Pickett because he seems like he's just had a tough run in both the UFC and life. But I thought the Francisco Rivera won that fight. I mean, it was a great and exciting fight with both guys slugging it out and going toe-to-toe. So it's kind of hard to complain. But ultimately, Rivera was the one who dropped and hurt Pickett, so I'd give it to him. Anyway, now the main stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, it was certainly a good way to kick it off with a legend over there, and everybody enjoyed watching Pickett, like you mentioned, win that. And also, just before we get to the next fight, he did mention that if he was going to lose that one, he was going to contemplate retirement, or he would have retired. So it was good to see he picked up a win and the career goes on. I mean, if anybody represents the working class man from that area more than Pickett, I'd like to see him. I mean, it was just a great win, and I think a lot of fans really enjoyed seeing him get his hand raised. But what about the next fight, Cass? Nakamura versus Tom Breeze. Now, this is a fight where a lot of people thought Tom Breeze was going to easily destroy Nakamura. Nakamura, obviously, a legend in MMA in the sense that he is very, very experienced, has had a lot of fights, but not really known for being a striker and is primarily a grappler. So a lot of people thought that Breeze was going to go in there and just devastatingly knock him out. What happened in the fight, though, was something that surprised a lot of people. First of all, Nakamura actually held his own in the striking department. He actually didn't look too bad, didn't look too flustered, and actually landed a few shots of his own. And then what happened was Breeze ended up dominating Nakamura on the ground. And it was very, very surprising because Nakamura actually got him down a number of times, got him to mount, but was not able to keep the position. Tom Breeze going for leg locks. Wasn't able to get it, but it was a very, very smart way to get Nakamura off him, of that top mount position. There were moments there where I thought, okay, here we go. Nakamura has got him here. He's got him on the ground. He's got him in a good position. He almost went for a yes lock, which is Daniel Bryan's finishing move. When you go for an omoplata, you reach around the front and you actually put in a choke. It's an actual move. People don't realize it because it's in pro wrestling, but it's very difficult to finish. And it looks like he was going for it. Very difficult with a guy like Tom Breeze who's super long.
Do you think he's a Daniel Bryan fan? Obviously, Daniel Bryan recently retired. Do you think maybe shout out Daniel Bryan by Nakamura?
I think so, maybe. I mean, look, if you finish someone with a yes lock, how impressive is that? I mean, and maybe the fans start chanting yes. It's a whole thing that comes with it. But I got to say, at the end, Breeze did win, but he seemed a bit disappointed. And then he admitted in post-fight that, he needs more cage time. And I liked his honest perspective on this because I think a lot of people do see him as the future of the division. Or maybe not the future of the division, but a young up-and-comer, someone with a big potential. And I like the fact that he was honest and he saw the fact that he still needs more experience before he goes up there. But look, before we move on, Cass, what were your thoughts on the fight? And, were you surprised that Breeze was able to actually out-grapple a grappler?
Yeah, well, no, Tom Breeze is very good on the ground, but he's mainly good when he's on top, and he does have very good takedown defense. I was surprised that Nakamura was able to take him down multiple times in the fight. Breeze obviously ended up on his back multiple times as well. Good on him for hanging in there and obviously beating Nakamura. It was a pretty close fight. Like you mentioned, there was the yes lock, so it was entertaining. I just think with Tom Breeze, he was sort of going for a lot of submissions and he wasn't really worried about, the positioning, so to speak. And yeah, obviously very surprising. I honestly thought he'd finish Nakamura in the second, maybe the third. I thought he was going to keep it standing. I thought Nakamura, not really known for fantastic takedowns and not really, that fast either. I thought he was going to be, I thought he was going to struggle with Breeze. I thought Breeze was going to finish him in the second or third. Didn't go, how he thought. And obviously they're trying to build him up very slow. It wasn't the easiest fight for Breeze, even though I think the odds were something like 1,000 to Breeze and plus 600 to Nakamura. Wow. Yeah, it was pretty ridiculous. So, it definitely shocked a lot of the odds makers. And obviously you talked about his, people talking about how he's the future, and that's exactly what people were saying. People were saying that he's kind of like the new Michael Bisping. He's going to take the reins. Michael Bisping's, kind of getting a bit older and long in the tooth, and Tom Breeze is kind of like the new version 2.0. We saw that he's still got a long way to go, and like you, I am impressed, and I appreciate his honesty. And, sometimes it's good to see people, not necessarily good to see them down on themselves, but when they are down on themselves, it shows that they care. It's better to see that they're unhappy with their performance than have a crappy performance and be happy about it.
And before we jump to the next fight, and somebody who wasn't unhappy with his performance after the victory, I just want to say one of the other things that surprised me was, apart from the fact that Breeze was getting out of all those difficult positions, was the fact that he couldn't really get his distance down with his striking. I mean, again, Nakamura, someone who's experienced, has had a lot of fights, but you just didn't see that devastating striking from Tom Breeze. And it could be a number of things, maybe pressure. Maybe a lot of people are expecting him to just go out there and just destroy people. Obviously, throughout the fight, commentators kept repeating how he's had boxing bouts offered to him, how he trains in a boxing gym. I mean, a lot of regard for his striking skills, but he just had a real struggle getting that distance down and getting into a good groove with his striking, which was a bit surprising to me because like most other people, I expected him to go out there and just dominate.
Well, he said that he was tired. He said he didn't really have any energy. It's hard to say what that could have been. It may be that he's fighting in London and he had a massive adrenaline dump. I don't know. That could have been one of the factors. But you mentioned someone who's not happy with his performance. I think he was pretty happy. I just don't think the fans were Gegard Mousasi versus Talis Leites. Give us your thoughts, man. What did you think about this one, Dennis?
It was tough because, I mean, as we were watching this, and we've seen the evolution of Talis Leites sort of throughout the years, and he's come to a point where he's had a lot of confidence in his striking. Well, in this fight, I just didn't see very much confidence in his striking. Didn't see him have much confidence in his striking. He came in, he went for this takedown straight away, and when Mousasi showed that it wasn't going to be that easy to take him down, he didn't really back himself in the striking department until very late in the fight, where he did have some success in the third round. It was a little bit disappointing to see because it was almost like a throwback to when he fought Anderson Silva and he was sort of falling on his back, wanting Mousasi to engage with him. And it was really the sign. The signs were all there. The fight was pretty much over. And it was a question of how will Mousasi handle it. And, he did a very, very good job. A lot of fantastic jabs, 1-2s, very, very basic combinations, but very effective. That jab just destroyed Talas's face, and people don't realize it because a lot of it wasn't massive power shots, but he just slowly picked apart his face, and by the end we saw one of his eyes was shut closed, just swelling everywhere. I was really impressed by Mousasi. I know a lot of people were disappointed that he didn't go out there and be reckless. You know, Ariel Helwani tweeted out and he said, I wonder what he's going to look like after, you know, the loss to Uriah Hall. And I guess there's two ways that a fighter can come out of this. One way is he goes out there and he just tries to absolutely destroy the person in front of him. And another way is he learns something about fighting and the fact that he's got to be smart. And I think Mousasi, after that loss to Hall, realized, hey, I could probably beat most of these guys as long as I'm smart. And this might be the new Mousasi going on from now, because maybe he's realized how devastating a loss can be. I mean, he spoke about it post-fight. But before we get into that, Cass, your thoughts on the fight?
Yeah, I don't know if it'll be a new Mousasi, because Mousasi's known for these performances, you know, basically going behind his jab and winning fights like that. We saw it against Ilir Latifi. We've seen it heaps of times. I know that you're not really impressed with Lati's striking, and I agree he turned it on a little bit late towards the end, which to me, that was an improvement. You mentioned the Anderson Silva fight, and I thought the same thing. He really wanted to get to the fight to the ground. He couldn't. He was flopping on his back. He was pulling guard. And Mousasi has in the past really struggled with fighters taking him down against the cage. His defensive wrestling isn't the greatest. And if you want to take down Gegard Mousasi, against the cage is the best place. And Lati's did that at the very start of the fight. He failed on his early takedowns against the cage, and I think that kind of shook him a little bit. I don't know if it was really his plan to take him, not take him down. I think it was the plan to take him down. I don't know if it was really the plan to strike with him. So I think he sort of got stuck striking with him, and even though obviously Talas Leites has been on an incredible journey and his striking has improved massively over the last few years, and when we spoke to him, he said it's about confidence. We said, what's different about... And we've spoken to Talas a few times on the show, one time on his birthday, and we said, what's different? You're knocking guys out. You're looking better than ever in the stand-up. What's different? He said, I've always had it. It's not different. I'm not doing anything for power. It's my confidence. And my coaches have obviously been believing me. I've been believing in me, and that's what it is. And I think when you're going against a guy like Mousasi and he starts jabbing, he starts closing your eye, starts brutally destroying your face with something as simple as a jab, I think he lost his confidence, and that's what we saw. So, you know, kudos to Talas Leites. At the end, he was throwing big bombs. Nothing really landed, but at least he was going for it. And I think it was a great win for Mousasi after, like you mentioned, that embarrassing KO loss to Uriah Hall, a fight that he was winning. And, you know, people, especially at the end, people booed about Gegard Mousasi not really doing anything. I mean, when you're on the ground with a guy like Talas Leites, who's a phenom, and he's working for something, all right.
There's omoplata pretty much locked in. There's a lot of trouble.
Right, it was like an omoplata. He was going for rubber guard, and there's 30 seconds. You're probably not going to get caught, but maybe, okay, you would think you're not going to get caught, right, in 30 seconds. But would you have...
It's a tough one. You may.
But would you think that Uriah Hall is going to land that kick on him? Of course you wouldn't, right? So, look, I think it's smart. You need to come back. Gegard, and that's the other thing about confidence. Gegard Mousasi had plenty of it before Uriah Hall. He basically said that he doesn't see anybody beating him ever again. That's the kind of confidence that he was in going against Uriah Hall. And then that happened. So I understand where Ariel Helwani's coming from, questioning and wondering what kind of Mousasi we were going to see. I thought we saw a very good version. I was impressed with the win, even if a lot of people weren't. And just another quick thing, Mousasi has copped it in the past. Who was it? Costa Philippou. He grinded out a decision win, took him down to the ground, played it very safe. And he had a lot of fans giving him crap over Facebook, and he was going off at fans. Fans are swearing at him, saying all this stuff, and he was going off at them. I think when he lost to Uriah Hall, those same fans are saying it's karma, you suck, and things million times worse, stuff about his family, you suck, you deserve to lose after how you beat Costa Philippou. So he's no stranger to having the fans backlash against him.
Yeah, and I just think there's nothing wrong with a guy being smart in the ring. I think because he mentioned post-fight that Uriah Hall loss really put him back a lot. And I think he realizes that a loss in the position that he's in really does affect how much money you make, the opportunities that you have in the future. And I don't think there's anything wrong with him being in a position like that and being smart. I mean, I know a lot of fans just want to see guys bang, but I really saw a lot of great striking from him. And I was actually a big fan of this fight because from a technical aspect, it was just great to watch Mousasi strike.
Yeah, I fully agree. And the other thing is, Dan Hardy, man, I got to take my hats off to him for the terrific commentary in this event, and every time he puts on a headset, really. Him and Brian Stan are always, for me, I imagine for you as well, always a pleasure to listen to and provide excellent insight, especially on the mental side of fighting, which I find really interesting because obviously you and me, Dennis, we're not fighters, and it's something that most people can't grasp just by watching a fight. Even if you can break down the techniques, even if you can talk about what you're seeing and really get into it, it's another thing talking about the mental side. So I really appreciate Dan Hardy breaking that down, and that's one of the things he talked about with Talis Ladies and his lack of confidence and his ever shrinking confidence for his striking during that fight. So hats off to Dan Hardy and Brian Stan. Shout out to him as well. Can't leave.
Yeah, and I mean, I know Musashi was pretty frustrated afterwards, but I think, there's still a lot of stuff that he can do in the game. And it was just crazy that he's 30 years old. It feels like he's been around forever. I mean, he's really only getting to his prime right now. So interesting to see what happens with him next. But speaking of middleweight fights with high expectations, Cass, the main event, Silva versus Bisping. Now, there was a bit of a story that went into this one before we even get into the fight.
Yeah, and with Musashi, we've got plans for him. I want to mention him a little bit later on in the show. So the story going in there, this is obviously a big fight, a lot bigger than what it would have originally been, Bisping versus Musashi. There was a lot of questions around both Silva and Bisping. Obviously, Silva being 40 years older, he's coming back from a year-long layoff after a failed drug test and people suspecting that he was cheating his whole career. So one of the biggest questions was how his confidence was going to be. And the scary thing... Actually, I'll mention this in a second because I want to sort of get your prediction as well. But yeah, basically the biggest question around Anderson Silva was how's his confidence? And obviously with his advanced age and coming off a controversial layoff, how's he going to look? Bisping, on the other hand, he was, everyone knows this, but he's always sort of come short of a title shot and lost the fights that would get him exactly that. And he's no stranger to age either. He's an aging guy, and he himself had a big injury a few years ago with the detached retina. And just a few things on him. While he certainly can be called a pioneer of UK and European MMA and will no doubt be remembered in the Hall of Fame, his wins have always come over decent but not great competition, and he's never beaten a future or former champion. So you could argue that going to this fight, his biggest win was either Kung Lee or Brian Stan. So there was a lot of questions surrounding him, what his legacy was going to look like. Dennis, I'll cut to you. What did you think was going to happen in this fight? How did you think it was going to look? Who did you think was going to win? If you had, even a definitive prediction.
Yeah, look, my prediction was pretty definitive. I actually thought Anderson Silva was going to TKO or KO Bisping in the second round. And it's just exactly how you mentioned. Every time Bisping sort of builds up these streaks, he does run into someone on the level of an Anderson Silva, or even Anderson Silva's on a much higher level than a lot of these guys. And I think when you and me were in Sydney and we watched that Luke Rockhold fight, it took a little bit of my confidence away from Bisping's skill set in fighting some of these upper echelon guys. So, my prediction was definitely Anderson Silva. Even though he's coming off a layoff, I really thought and I felt like he had a lot to prove in this fight and he was going to deliver. What about you?
Yeah, I had Anderson as well up until the last few days, and I really started looking at the guys' records and seeing what they're all about. Not that I'm a stranger to either guy, but sometimes you have this image of a fighter in your mind, and then when you start looking through things and remembering things, you're like, okay, there's a different story here. So, with Bisping, obviously, since, like you mentioned, that loss to Rockhold, he's had two close fights against CB Dollaway and Talis Ladies, or at least, those are his two wins. And you think, like, the CB Dollaway fight, that was a great fight, but it was really close. Talis Ladies, even closer, and you had Talis. You thought Talis won, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I believe Talis won that fight.
Right, so, you had a close fight, and Talis, and the reason why you thought Talis won was because he hit Bisping with some big shots, and you thought that he did more damage. And I thought, well, Talis Ladies, like, he's got decent striking, and like we said, he's evolved a lot in the striking, but he's no Anderson Silva. And I thought if Talis Ladies can catch Michael Bisping, surely Anderson Silva could as well, right? And I kind of, I sort of looked through Anderson Silva's record. The scary thing is that Anderson Silva's last real win was over a really irrelevant and far from elite Stephan Bonner all the way back in 2012. How crazy is that? And prior
it's unbelievable, yeah.
I didn't realize that till I sort of started looking through his record. And, obviously before that, he got KO'd by Weidman. And then, even more famously, he broke his leg in the rematch. And then he came back from injury and had a so-so performance against Nate Diaz. So I was like, I'm not that confident in Anderson Silva. Meanwhile, you got Bisping, who has had close fights, but at least he's been active. And, Anderson Silva was sort of away for a year. Before that, he was away for at least a year. So I don't know, man. I didn't have a definitive prediction. I kind of had like a series of feelings. Like, technically, I would have said Anderson Silva, but all the X factors like the layoff for Silva, his age, the confidence of coming back from, the full year of scrutiny, and obviously Bisping just this whole week seeming like he was in the best mental state and physical state, which is what has been echoing the whole time, and obviously his coach saying the same thing, and just not only the hyperbole, but just what you see at the open workouts as well. He's just looked like a man on the mission. I had a slight inkling that Bisping might win it, but I didn't really believe it till it happened. So I'll get your take on the fight, and go as slow as you want, because there's a lot to talk about other than just scoring it. I mean, there's a lot of crazy shit that happened.
Yeah, a lot of crazy stuff. I mean, let's jump into the first round. Bisping comes out, pushes the action, lands a nice combo. His movement looks fantastic. To be honest, I know he's looked great in a lot of his, recent wins, but something about his movement today, I was just really impressed. Very quick, really good foot movement, lots of energy, springing his step, tips of his toe, that kind of thing. Silva seemed to, try and get his distance down, and I don't know. It just didn't seem to happen. Silva had his hands down and wanted Bisping to come in. And this is where the mind games could have began. But it seemed like Bisping was a bit too smart for it. Bisping hit Silva with a nice combo. At the end of the round, I mean, nothing major happened. But for me, Bisping did win the round. Obviously, he had the better output, octagon control. At the end of that round, Silva looks to hug Bisping, and Bisping pushes him away, which is at the beginning of the many classic moments in this fight. So in that round, I felt like, obviously, Bisping won. Did you want to jump in and give your analysis of the round? Do you want me to just go through the fight and then you give your breakdown?
Well, one thing that I noticed, to me, Silva looked a bit stiff and nervous at the start of the first, but then he did start to relax toward the end of the first. You mentioned sort of the mind games. He looked to loosen up a little bit, but he did get backed up against the cage, and Bisping caught him with about, 3 good shots? Yeah. So I would definitely give that round to Bisping. It was the only definitive part of that. I know people were saying Silva looked like he was rocked. I don't know if he was rocked. He kind of looked more staggered to me. I don't think he was about to go down. But yeah, for me, clear round for Michael Bisping. Those 3 shots definitely sealed the round. And, Silva being backed up against the cage, it really was kind of the story of that fight in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
How did you have the second round?
And also, just up on that cage, this is a situation where, I don't know, maybe more in his prime, Silva would have used his movement and his head movement to sort of get guys off cue, but he just seemed a bit slower. I know he's a bit older, but he just seemed a bit slower and his timing was off. And I think in Silva's mind, this is where his doubts started, In the second round, Bisping had confidence, pushed forward. He hit Silva. Silva stands there with his hands down, but then Bisping stands back and puts his hands on his hips, showing him, again, I'm not going to get into your mind games. If you want to stand there against the fans with your hands down, you can just do that until you're ready to fight, which I found really cool. And I mean, this fight was just great for the fans. Another great, entertaining moment. Anyway, Silva
it reminded me of Nick Diaz, when he lay down in the octagon? Yes. It was like Bisping's version. He puts his hand on his hips. I'm not going to do that, Anderson. It's the worst Bisping accent ever. We'll just move on from that.
Yeah, that's right. It was a really interesting part in the fight. And what I really noticed in this round was Silva realized he needed to be a bit more unorthodox in this fight and started with his unorthodox techniques, because Bisping was beating him in the straight striking, and he needed to try and get in his mind, try and get some movement, some fluidity in his striking to start to sort of do what he's done in the past. But it wasn't really happening for him. And, we saw Bisping hit him with a 1-2 combo, which knocked him down to the ground, and he ended up in Silva's guard. And it was one of those points where almost Silva was holding on for dear life, hoping the round was going to finish. So that, for me, was another victorious round for Bisping. That's the second round that he won in a row. Anything else pop out to you in that round, Cass?
I think, no, you covered it well. That's the main thing. That was the highlight of that round. And the crazy thing is, Michael Bisping predicted that he'd beat Anderson Silva in the second round. So when I saw that, I was like, holy shit. Like when he did that walk with Ariel, and I think he's predicted it a few times as well, but he did say ground and pound, TKO, the second round. So that was a crazy moment in on itself. And unless you saw those predictions, it may have just been, well, it still would have been crazy, Bisping dropping Anderson Silva, but that made it even more crazy. But for sure, for me, that's 2 rounds Bisping. The 3 good shots at the end for the first round, and then dropping Anderson Silva, by far the biggest thing that happened that round.
This next round, I mean, wow, what a round this next round was. I mean, I think we'll probably break it down in a couple of parts. Before the craziness and after the craziness and what exactly happened in the craziness. So before the craziness, I'll just break it down. Basically, more of the same. Silva struggling, not able to do very much. And but he did get Bisping's leg. He caught him and he tripped him down, and then he kicked him in the ass as Bisping was getting up. As a Rampage Jackson will let us know, apparently those kicks really hurt. Those kicks to the ass when people are on the ground. And then there was a series of kicks in the fight that I don't think the commentary really focused on, but to me they really stood out. And I'm not sure if you remember this part or not, Cass, but Silva actually kicked Bisping a couple of times to the body. And I actually thought that Bisping might have been stunned a bit by that first body kick. It was up against the fence. It was in the third round. Bisping sort of backed up. He hit him with the first body kick, and then he hit him with the second one afterwards. And I actually got a bit nervous, a bit amped up. I thought, hey, maybe something was going to happen here, but alas, it didn't stop the fight. But it was a point that the commentary didn't really address that really sort of stood out in my head. After that, Cass, I mean, I don't know if you want to take it from here. We watched this part a number of times. The mouthpiece falls out and all craziness ensues. Do you want to take it from here? Do you have a good analysis of what happened?
Right, so the mouthpiece falls out, and pretty much immediately Michael Bisping is pointing to the mouthpiece. He wants the fight not so much stop, but he wants the referee to call time so he can put his mouthpiece back in. Silva, I don't even know if you realized, he either realized or he's not having it or he doesn't care, but he continues the assault on Michael Bisping. At this point, Michael Bisping seems pretty distracted. I think there's like a brief moment where they are against the cage. Anderson Silva has Michael Bisping. I think he's going for a tight plumb. Bisping pushes him away. There's a little bit of separation, at which point Bisping points to Herb Dean and he motions and he sort of says, my mouthpiece. Again, Silva, whether he doesn't understand or doesn't care, he throws the knee and drops Michael Bisping in what is one of the most craziest moments. Actually, what am I talking about? Easily the craziest moment in the entire fight. And then the bell sounds. So I guess one of the biggest discussions, actually there's a few, right? There's one that's the argument that Anderson could have finished the fight at the end of the third after that flying knee. Maybe. But the horn sounded pretty much as soon as he landed, and there wasn't really any more time to get in any more offense. Like he hits the knee, Bisping drops, Silva lands on his feet. That's it. The horn sounds. And I also think at that point, Herb Dean felt bad for not calling a timeout and maybe have been a little bit favorable to Bisping. I mean, really, excuse me, really, I don't think Anderson would have even been able to throw in a punch or anything at that point. There was literally that little time. So unless he maybe postured over Bisping, I don't think Herb Dean would have necessarily stopped it. But here's the thing, right? I know I'm going to try and put an end to all this controversy, or at least a lot of it, because people are saying the fight should have been paused, stopped, whatever, the mouthpiece. Okay, for those who thought that Herb Dean screwed up, here's the official rule, and you can see this on the UFC website. I went through there as opposed to the NSAC or whatever the London version is of the State Athletic Commission. I'm going to read it word for word. If the mouthpiece is involuntarily dislodged during competition, the referee shall call time, clean the mouthpiece, and reinsert the mouthpiece at the first opportune moment without interfering with the immediate action. So there you go. So, look, the action was continuing. There was that brief separation. I think that would have interfered. I know Bisping, pointed, but Herb Dean was obviously behind Anderson Silva. I think it all happened too fast, and I can't fault Herb Dean for this one. Dennis, what are your thoughts about how it went down?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. And for the people out there that are complaining about it, the rule is basically in place so that fighters just don't spit out their mouth guard whenever they start losing and cause a pause. So it's a very important rule. I absolutely agree with everything you said, Cass. I mean, you covered it very, very well. And yeah, I agree with you. I don't really think there was that time for Anderson to throw anything else in there after that knee because, like you mentioned, it was pretty much on the buzzer there. And a lot of people are saying that maybe if he didn't run off and start celebrating and maybe postured over him, I don't know, maybe. I don't know. Herb Dean has been known to sort of stop fights a bit earlier sometimes, but I don't really think there was much opportunity there. I think it was just one of those situations where Herb Dean was just in the position where he had to make a choice, and I think he made the right choice. But what did you think about everything that ensued afterwards? Anderson Silva jumping up on the cage, people running into the ring. I believe cutmen weren't allowed to come in or something like that. There were people from the commission coming in. It was like absolute pandemonium, and Herb Dean, I mean, did his best to try and control the circus that was going on. What was going through your mind when you saw what was going on? Because I was just going crazy. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, pandemonium and circus, those are probably the two perfect words that I would have used, so thanks for stealing those. But you know what pissed me off, though? The fact that, look, I don't have an issue with Anderson Silva celebrating. I mean, to me, it all kind of seemed a little bit Yoel Romero-ish when it first happened. I was like, are you serious? This is going to be like, I don't know what they'll call it. It's not a stool gate. It's not a water gate. It's not a grease gate. It'll be like, I don't know, celebrate gate or knee gate or something like that. Mouthpiece gate.
Poor gates.
I don't blame Anderson Silva for celebrating. I mean, he thought the fight was finished. I don't even know if he heard the horn. Herb Dean looked like he kind of stopped it, so I don't blame him. But you know what pissed me off is that when he's sitting there, right, the UFC officials are trying to tell him to get down. That's fine. I think there's an unofficial rule where you can't get on top of the cage. I know that everybody does it, but I think technically you're not supposed to. And when people do it, you always see someone saying, get down, get down. That's fine. I'm cool with that. And I think what happened was the UFC officials were trying to tell him they were trying to tell him the fight's not over. But Anderson, with A, his limited English, B, he just thinks he won the fight. I don't think he's listening to anyone, let alone in English. I think maybe he thought they were trying to tell him, like, get down from the cage, you can't be here. And because you see him motion to the UFC official, he's like, he uses his hands. It looks to me like he's saying, like, please give me a second, just one moment, I'm going to celebrate. So the UFC official obviously isn't getting through to him. All right, fair enough. You know what pissed me off, though? Is his team, right? One of them, Luis Dore, the striking coach for him, and Junior Dos Santos, he's just standing there kind of watching this happen. It's like, dude, you're the closest to him, all right? Like, in terms of, you know him. Why don't you yell in Portuguese? Why don't you yell something and say to him, like, the fight's not over. It's like if you and me were fighting in Brazil, you think you won the fight, I'm in your corner, it's a rocky moment, and people, yelling Brazilian to you, and you don't understand, and then I'm like, dude, the fight's not over. Well, that's when it's going to sink in. So it kind of pissed me off that, his corner, who was standing right there, right below him, didn't say anything to him.
Yeah, that's a great point as well. And just finally on it, a lot of people going, well, was it fair for him to land that shot when Michael Bisping wasn't looking? I mean, at the end of the day, a fight's a fight, and it's Michael Bisping's responsibility to keep his attention on Anderson Silva, even though his mouthpiece was out of his mouth. I mean, Anderson Silva technically didn't break any rules by throwing that knee. And also, in the back of my mind, I thought, look, up to that point, he wasn't really doing very well. I think a part of him was relieved and happy that he actually landed that knee and was able to win that fight, because I think a part of him was sort of starting to doubt what was going to happen in the conclusion of it. So it was one of those things where you can't really fault Silva. I mean, Silva did his job. He kept fighting. He threw the knee. And Bisping was the one that should have kept his attention on him and not looked away and spoken to the ref.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to use the word stupid because it's disrespectful, and obviously there's a lot going in that cage, but it wasn't the smartest move. It was a massive error on Bisping's part, and I'm 100% of the opinion Silva did nothing wrong. He did zero wrong. He's in the cage, he's supposed to fight, and he fought. He threw a knee. That's exactly what he's supposed to do. It's not like Bisping was down. It's not like, how else do you throw an illegal knee? I don't know. It's not like Bisping was down. The round was still going, and we've said this many times on the show, you can't self-officiate a fight. I know there's some bad refs out there. Unfortunately, you can't self-officiate a fight. The mouthpiece, we mentioned the rule just before. I think it was a big error on Michael Bisping's part to start talking to the ref, and hopefully it's something that, because I think it happened in the Rockhold fight as well. He got the headbutt and he was sort of yelling to the ref, and maybe he's just sort of used to it, that if he says something, if he causes a big stink, they'll do something. I can understand, because I guess in his mind, he thinks, I should have the mouthpiece. But at the end of the day, it's the ref's job to do that. It's the ref's call. And someone like Herb Dean, 99% of the time, he's in the right. He's not one of the refs, to me at least, that's notorious for making bad calls. So I think if Herb Dean doesn't feel like it's time to step in and put the mouthpiece in, I'd go with that. So I'm 100%, everything that Silva did, totally legal, totally kosher, and I think it was Michael Bisping's error, and in a lot of ways, it was Michael Bisping's fault that he got dropped.
Jumping into the fourth round, Bisping comes forward, and Silva hits him in the. Oh, you have something else you want to say about the big controversy?
Not so much that, just the scoring. So that's round 3. So we've got 2 for Bisping, 1 for Silva. We're all in agreement on that, right? He dropped him.
Absolutely.
That's his round. Yeah, okay,
100%. The thing that stood out to me about the fourth round was when Bisping came out, Silva hit him in the nuts, and he gets 5 minutes. And you'd think that, all right, you're on Queer Street. 90%, 100% sure he was on Queer Street. He got hit in the head. I mean, you saw the damage from that knee. He was down. You'd think he'd take the whole 5 minutes and sort of get his wits about him, wouldn't you?
I thought, and I tweeted it out, I said if Bisping's smart, he'll take every second of those 5 minutes. And I actually have a lot of respect for him. I already did, but I have even more respect the fact that, you talk about martial arts and being a true martial artist, and that was one of the things that Bisping and Anderson would go back on during the fight week, and Bisping would talk to him about being, a true martial artist and having that honor. I was like, dude, this guy's a true martial artist. He could have taken the 5 minutes. He didn't. He took a minute, 2, if that. It was like a minute, and he was straight back in there. If it was me, I would have been like, fuck the code and martial arts. I'm taking 5 minutes. I want to win this fight.
Yeah, exactly. I would have been like that as well. But to me, he seemed a little bit emotional. Like he was a bit pissed off about what happened. You really saw it in the fight. There was another substantial moment in that fight where he actually eye-poked Anderson Silva. And, people booed, but it was actually a pretty bad eye poke.
Yeah.
When I watched that replay, it was right in there. And if you actually look under Anderson Silva's eye, you see the mark from that eye poke. So, again, they called the doctor, and I was a bit worried actually that eye poke was going to bring an end to the fight. Could you imagine that? That eye poke brings an end to the fight. I would have been so disappointed.
Yeah, I didn't think that, but I kind of thought like, okay, yeah. When I first saw it, I thought, why are they bringing the doctor? Because they asked Anderson, do you want to see the doctor? And he said yes. And I thought, is he stalling? Is he being dodgy? And then they show that replay, and I was like, you know what? That's pretty bad. I can understand that. All right, fair. And you know what? I mean, we've spoken about it many times on the show that you don't mess around with eye pokes. And it's like a groin shot. It brings a halt to the fight, and it brings a halt to everything that you're doing in the cage. You can't concentrate, you're distracted, you can't see. And for a guy like Anderson Silva and Bisping, where depth perception is everything, I can totally understand why you'd want to bring a doctor in.
It was crazy pandemonium, and the fights were happening, so it was difficult to sort of take it all in. But the other thing that stands out to me about this round is the Superman punch that Anderson Silva landed on Michael Bisping at the end of the round, sort of finishing the round out. Is there anything else that stood out to you about this round, Cass?
Honestly, I thought that fourth round, to me, it was all Bisping. I mean, he backed Anderson up against the cage. He was busy throughout pretty much the whole fight. Anderson, you're right, he did land 2 big shots at the end, but they weren't that damaging, and I don't think it was enough to win the round, really. It was, and we'll talk about this in a moment, but there's a lot of screwing around by Anderson in this fight, and I just don't think he did enough with those 2 punches to win the round. So for me, that's round 4 Bisping. We've got him rounds 1, 2, 4. It's 3-1 to Bisping. And then going to the 5th round, what did you think, Dennis?
And by the way, just for the record, I thought that was Bisping's round as well. No doubt about it. Agree with you on that one as well. By the 5th round, you see Mike sitting on the stool and his face is pretty messed up. I mean, there's blood going into his eye. And it's not just that he's got cuts underneath his eye. He's actually got a horrible one in his eyebrow. And those are the bad ones that you need to watch out for, because that's the one that goes directly into his eye. So going to the 5th round, I was a little bit nervous for Bisping in the sense that, will he be able to see out of that eye long enough to survive this round? Because if you're Anderson Silva right now, you're going to be throwing all the heat that you have of that eye. I mean, I didn't know what was going to happen. Before that round started, were you sort of thinking about the same thing, Cass?
Yeah, I mean, those 2 big shots at the end, I kind of thought, how are they going to affect Bisping? But like I said, I don't think they were that damaging. So I thought if he can get through that knee, I think he'll be able to eat those shots. Yeah, the face is busted. And it was his nose as well. His whole face was scary looking. And then he got that eye, the dodgy eye on Bisping. The whole thing looked scary. But I thought, you know what, I don't know. I was pretty confident that if he doesn't get finished, he's going to be fine. So, and you know what though? How crazy is it that Anderson almost finished the fight in the 5th round? He was that close with that front kick.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just before we get to that front kick, he did throw a couple of good kicks to Michael Bisping. I guess he was realizing that he was struggling to see. And then Herb Dean stops the fight. The doctor comes in, and I start stressing out again, thinking, imagine if the doctor calls this thing off. Like, Bisping would never give up. But I've always got this evil angel or evil demon on the side of my shoulder going, all right, this is it. It's a great fight, but it's going to be ruined by some kind of weird stoppage by a doctor. Thank goodness that didn't happen. I mean, you mentioned that front kick. Before, there was some substantial stuff that was going on. Is there anything else that stood out to you about this round, Cass?
Not really. I mean, just that front kick. I do feel like the old Anderson maybe would have finished Michael Bisping. I was really surprised that Bisping just ate it. I mean, he's always been tough, and he's really only been finished a handful of times, Michael Bisping. I'm just trying to think. There's Vitor Belfort, there's Dan Henderson. I know Vanderlei dropped him here in Australia. There wasn't really too many times in his tough, but I was surprised nevertheless at how he ate that kick.
And I was also surprised. You mentioned that kick he was down, and you look at the time, and it's like 1 minute, 13 seconds left, something like that. And you go, all right, here we go. Anderson Silva is going to go for it now. He knows that Bisping's hurt. Here we go. And then the clock just kept ticking down. You got to 30 seconds. You're like, all right, here we go. Anderson Silva. He's gonna go for it. He's gonna come up with something amazing. Then it went down to 20 seconds, 10 seconds, and then the round finished. Were you surprised that Anderson Silva didn't try and capitalize more on Bisping being hurt by that front kick?
I think, honestly, Bisping recovered pretty quickly, and he sort of showed that he was ready, and I think Anderson Silva realized that. So I don't think he wanted to be foolish and rush in. You know, he already got dropped before in, whatever round, I don't even remember anymore. He already got dropped by Michael Bisping. I don't think he wanted to risk anything. I think he knows that he's gotten a bit older. I think Bisping was faster this whole fight. You know, he was slower than Bisping. I don't think he wanted to be too risky. And people are saying Anderson could have won the fight if he had been more offensive and didn't screw around so much. Yeah, I understand that, but I think he was hoping to get into Bisping's head, like he's done, you know, to his past opponents and distract them long enough to land a big counter, kind of like he did with that front kick. And I don't know whether he was trying to do that the whole fight, but you see he was against the cage, and Michael Bisping... And Anderson Silva does that so often. He goes against the cage, he invites his opponents, and then he makes them look foolish. Whether they rush in, and he sidesteps, and then he often drops them. Pretty sure, I think Yushin Okami got dropped similar, where Anderson was against the cage, he sidestepped, and then he dropped Yushin Okami. So I think he was hoping to do something similar, but Bisping never did take the bait. So, you know, and Anderson's fought like that his whole career. At 40 years old, coming back, I don't think he's going to be changing that game plan. He did it. He did it against Weidman, you know, at the time, his biggest challenge, and everybody knew that as well. So why would he do anything different against Michael Bisping?
And also, I think in his mind, he believed that he had won the fight. Because he's already made some comments about how he believes there was some kind of controversy because it was in the UK and it was Michael Bisping's homeland and that kind of thing. So maybe his corner was saying, look, all right, you're winning this round, you're winning these rounds. Or maybe in his mind he thought, look, because I knocked him down before, that means all the judges are going to give it to me. But obviously he had the wrong idea. But maybe that sort of didn't make him go crazy near the end of the round, whatever it was. You know, Bisping, obviously to us, won the fight. I just want to quickly just say something about Anderson Silva's style that you touched on before, and that's him playing around. I know a lot of people, like you mentioned, say, oh, he shouldn't be playing around, but I actually think, like you mentioned as well, that that's where he gets his success from. And if he didn't play around and he just straight fought with guys and just did his normal boxing, he would have never been that successful. The reason why, in my opinion, Anderson Silva got into people's heads and was able to do what he did in that octagon is because he took away people's confidence with his playing around with all these crazy techniques. And when it didn't work, and we've seen this happen in his last few fights, when people don't take the bait, then he really struggles. So no doubt about it, for me, that is one of his biggest weapons, getting into a person's head, messing around. And no doubt about it, he was trying to get into Bisping's head a number of times in this fight. It just didn't work, and that is why he really struggled to land as much as he normally does. That's one of my theories on one of the reasons why Silva just didn't have the success that he did tonight.
And that's such a tough thing, to be disciplined for that long, for 25 straight minutes. Like, you can, it's so easy to have a mental burnout. So I've got a lot of respect for Michael Bisping for not getting emotional and really staying with it. And that's actually one of the reasons, that's the main reason why he said he was in the best form ever, both physically and mentally. And Ariel Helwani obviously pressed him for it. He said, why? He said, everyone says they're in the best shape of their life. Why are you in the best? And he said, just from a mental standpoint, he said, I can stay calm. I'm not emotional anymore. He said, I can give the output. I can be successful. I can fight in the cage without being so emotional. And to me, he showed it. And what a hard fight to not get emotional during. You've got the mouthpiece, the knee, you know, your face is busted up. It's a close fight. I don't know whether Michael Bisping was confident that he was winning that whole fight, but I imagine that's something that would have been playing on his mind the whole way through. And the other thing, just on Anderson Silva's style, you mentioned about him clowning people. He's a counter striker, always has been. And I think when he does clown around, he invites people to expose themselves and open themselves up, and that's when he counters. And I think Bisping was extremely disciplined in this fight, and he didn't give Anderson Silva those openings, much like Chris Weidman didn't, much like Nick Diaz didn't. So,
and Charles Sonnen as well. in their first fight.
Yeah, there you go. And it's funny because, you talk about Anderson Silva being up against the cage and inviting people, and then you see Chael Sonnen throwing that spinning back fist that he regretted. So, the clowning has worked for him for years and years and years, and he just will not lead. So for people saying that Anderson Silva should have pressured Michael Bisping, I don't agree with that. Not to say that he shouldn't, but he just never has. So I'm not surprised that he didn't in this fight.
It's not what he does, and it's not where he gets his success. I'm curious, Casper. I mean, I want to hear your opinion on this as well. Do you think that people have figured out the formula to beat Anderson Silva? I mean, I think it's taken a really, really long time, but now that some of the mystique has come off and he seems more human, do you think people have figured out the formula? We can go in there and be successful against Anderson Silva.
Yeah, I think to a degree, but I think it's also the fact that he is 40 years old. He just doesn't seem as fast, and it's what people have always been saying. A style like Anderson's, it's about timing. It's not even about speed, it's about timing. And as you get older, the first thing that goes is your speed, and that affects your timing. So I think now, he's, and I say this respectfully, he's an old man in a lot of ways fighting like a young man. His chin can't take the punishment. He probably sees it happening in his mind that he's moving a certain way, and his body's just not keeping up. He's just not as fast. There are certain things that he can't dodge, and I think, the 2 losses to Weidman, that would have taken a lot out of him. I mean, it was the first time he got knocked down in a long time, then obviously the injury, and then it's just been layoff after layoff. Then there's the confidence. For me, it seemed like it took a while for him to get confidence in this fight. Right? It seemed like until at least the second round, maybe even later, before he really looked confident. And I think multiple layoffs will do that to you. The age will do that to you. And I think, obviously, the massive amounts of controversy that he sustained through the accusations of being a cheater and people looking at him differently and his legacy of being affected, I think it affected his confidence. And don't get me wrong, I'm not in any way, this is not me giving Anderson excuses. I'm just saying one of the reasons why I think it's happened. I think it's all caught up with Anderson, and without a shadow of a doubt, in my opinion, I know people saying there's controversy. I don't think there's any controversy as far as the decision goes. Michael Bisping was definitely the best man, and he deserved to win. And we tweeted it out even before the decision was read out. Michael Bisping, 3 rounds to 2. And just to recap, Michael Bisping, he won rounds 1, round 2. Anderson won round 3. Bisping won round 4. And then Anderson won the last round. So I don't think there's any controversy there. Bisping's the winner.
Now, before we move on, we have to talk about the future for both of these gentlemen. I mean, let's start with Anderson Silva. Some people on social media saying they don't want to see Anderson Silva fight again. Other people saying, who knows, maybe if Luke Rockhold loses against Chris Weidman, that could be a good matchup. What are your thoughts on Anderson Silva and what happens to him next?
What would be the matchup if Luke Rockhold loses? Him and Weidman for the belt, or him and Luke Rockhold?
Him and Luke Rockhold.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to seeing that fight. I mean, I think Luke Rockhold beats him, even if he just wrestles. I think Luke Rockhold beats him in standing and in the ground either way. I think give him Tim Kennedy. Tim Kennedy's coming off a loss. He's coming off a massive layoff. Was it been like a year, 2 years, something like that? He's been on the shelf for a long time. He lost to Yoel Romero. And for the people saying they don't want to see Anderson fight again, why? I mean, he went up against Michael Bisping. He lost. And all those factors that I just mentioned, I mean, going up against Bisping on any kind of layoff is tough. Not to mention at 40 years old. And it's not like... Listen, I think it was definitive for Bisping, but it's not like he got creamed. It's not like he got knocked out in the first or second. This is like a really, really hard warm-up fight for Anderson. So I don't think he should retire. If he's willing, and I thought he was going to retire when he was doing that speech at the end, and he was like pausing every 2 seconds. I thought, man, he's going to pull the trigger. Here it comes. Here comes the retirement. I don't know. I think he was trolling everybody and wanted people to think that he was going to retire. But, I think give him Tim Kennedy. Tim wants that fight. Anderson lost. Tim Kennedy just lost. I think that's the fight that makes sense. And I'll explain that even further. If you look at the rankings, I mean, what have you got? Rockhold's the champ. Weidman's number 1. Jacare's 2. Vitor's 3. Jacare and Vitor are fighting each other. You got Lyoto Machida. They're not going to fight. They're teammates. And then you got Anderson Silva. Tim Kennedy's number 6. 5 and 6. By the time the rankings update, Anderson's probably going to be 7 because that's where Bisping is now. They'll switch places. You got 6 and 7. Tim Kennedy wants a big fight. I don't see any other argument for any other fights. What do you think, Dennis?
Yeah, I'd love to see that fight. I just think the build-up would be awesome. I think it's a big fight that Tim Kennedy wants. I mean, look, a lot of the guys in the UFC, a lot of the, I think some of the commentators, some of the media people mention that Vitor Belfort may be a fight that happens depending on what happens in the outcome between him and Jacare. Apparently, that's a fight that Vitor wants. I'm not sure. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't mind watching it, but I'd much prefer watching him versus Tim Kennedy. And then from an Aussie perspective, because we are an Aussie show, if Robert Whittaker wins his next fight, who knows, maybe a big fight in Australia, him versus Anderson Silva, but I think I'm just sort of being hopeful there. So yeah, Tim Kennedy would be a great fight. What about Michael Bisping? A lot of people...
Before we go, I'm not opposed to him and Vitor. You know, they're both older, and they're both looking different. Vitor physically, especially. I'm not opposed to that. And yeah, you're right, Vitor's one of that. Obviously, the first fight ended pretty spectacularly. In Vitor Belfort's mind, it was controversial. I'd be interested to see how they both look. And I think it's a winnable fight for either guy. Vitor Belfort, I feel like he's going to be around for a little bit longer than Anderson. And if he does beat him, if he beats Jacare and he beats Anderson, he's got a pretty decent case for a title shot, as opposed to now where it's a lukewarm case for a title shot. With Anderson, yeah, I like that fight.
It's interesting that, because I don't know, in the back of my mind, I think if he does beat Jacare, I almost want to see him maybe even get a title shot, depending on what happens, just because Jacare is such a top-level fighter. And
he could, yeah.
It's interesting to see, but who knows? I mean, that would still... A lot of people would like to see that.
Just the other thing I was going to say, with Tim Kennedy, I actually think Vitor and Anderson would be a better fight to watch. Because with Tim Kennedy, he's going to want to take him down and pound him out in, the first or second round. Tim Kennedy believes that he can smash him in the first round, and maybe he can. But if he can't, then it could be a case where Anderson Silva's... It could be another decision win for Tim Kennedy. It could be something that gets drawn out for, 3 or 5 rounds, depending on whether it's a main or co-main event. I think with Belfort, it's probably going to be a more exciting fight. Someone's probably going to get finished, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a good perspective. I guess the build-up would be interesting, but yeah, the actual fight, I think you got a good point there. Now, what about Michael Bisping? A lot of people wondering if he deserves the title shot after beating Anderson Silva. What would you do with Michael Bisping?
I think he has a cool as light and gets on top of the odd. Just kidding. There'll be none of that. Thank you. Honestly, I'd probably give him Musashi. I don't know if he's going to get a title shot, because you look at Rockhold and Weidman. They're not going to fight till June if they are really fighting at UFC 199, and it looks like they are. That's in June. We're in what? End of February. We're in March. Let's say March. It's the end of February. We're in March now, and Jacare and Belfort aren't fighting until May, and I think those guys are both closer to a title shot than Michael Bisping. Because if it's Luke Rockhold and he stays the champion, I wouldn't be interested in seeing a Rockhold and Bisping just yet, because I need more convincing. It's an amazing fight, amazing win for Bisping against Anderson Silva today, but I'm still not convinced. I thought Rockhold would beat him, and I think he beats him again. If it's Chris Weidman, at least it's something new. At least it's something fresh. But you got to think, Vitor Belfort and Jacare, they're closer. They're fighting in May, and Weidman and Rockhold are in June. So it's I think Bisping has to take another fight. Unless if Rockhold and Weidman fight in June, and then another 3 at least months till another title fight, Bisping's going to be on the shelf for 8 months or something like that. I don't know. My math is horrible, but I think he needs to take another fight, honestly.
But you know what? 8 months is what he might need to recover from that fight. He did take a lot of damage to his head. He's a bit older. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm interested, though. Would you possibly want to see Musashi fight Anderson Silva?
I'm not opposed to that, yeah.
Because they'll be right next to each other in the rankings when they get updated.
I think they'll be 1 apart. Yeah. You could do that.
Striking thing.
I think any fight right now for Bisping will be a step down, right? Because he may not even get a main event spot. But if you look at let's say he gets Musashi. Musashi's obviously not the name that Anderson Silva is, and I don't think that'd be a main event either. I think that'd be a co-main event. And then you give him Robert Whittaker, because that's a fight. And Musashi, that fight made sense. That was the original main event, or not even main event. That was the original fight for this card. Actually, and it wasn't the main event. I think that's the big thing. It wasn't the main event. So then you got Robert Whittaker versus Michael Bisping, which was going to happen at UFC 193. That's a possibility. I know Robert Whittaker's facing Nate Marquardt, so we'll see if he gets past him, which I think he will. But Robert Whittaker's he's a great fighter, but he's just not a name. So I don't see them giving him from Anderson Silva to Robert Whittaker, because it's if Robert Whittaker beats him, you've got a contender, and maybe that's an investment, but you've just sucked all the life out of Michael Bisping. I think Michael Bisping's kind of a feel-good story right now, so I don't know. I don't know. It's a tough one. I guess for me, you either give him Mousasi or he waits and gets a title shot. And I'd say Mousasi because, again, most other people are booked out. There's Lyoto Machida, but it's like, what does Bisping get from beating Lyoto Machida, who's on a 2-fight losing streak? You know, he's been on the shelf for a while. Unless I've forgotten, I don't think he's booked or anything like that. So, and at least with Mousasi, they fought on the same night. So, but again, and the other thing you mentioned, I know I'm sort of going in circles, but Mousasi is, I guess, pretty healthy, whereas Michael Bisping's banged up, so Mousasi will probably get a fight early. I don't know, man. Maybe this title shot is the thing that makes the most sense.
Or you could actually, before I go on, did you say that Robert Whittaker's fighting Nate Marquardt?
I believe he is.
No, he's fighting Rafael Natal.
Sorry, Rafael Natal. Yeah. Sorry, now Marquardt was a theory. Okay, you're right. Natal. Yep.
Yeah, and the other theory that we're sort of forgetting is, what about Vitor Belfort versus Michael Bisping, the rematch? If Vitor wins, that could be a pretty big fight because obviously there's a lot of controversy. Even though Vitor beat Bisping, he looked different back in those days. Now it's a more natural Vitor Belfort. Maybe there's a great story there as well. And if he does beat Belfort, then he really does have a case for a title shot if Belfort beats Jacare.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a story there, and I don't have anything in front of me, but I think Bisping was the one that Belfort beat to get that title shot in the first place. I think so. There is definitely a story there. You can definitely build up the rematch. I don't know how keen Michael Bisping would be. He's talked about how he doesn't want to fight any PED users in the future. And then he goes and fights Anderson Silva. So maybe he does. He kind of seems like a company man at this point. So I think if they give him that fight, he'll probably say yes and agree to it. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I know that if he does get that fight, he's definitely going to be very motivated, Michael Bisping, and he's obviously going to want to erase that loss from his record. And especially the guy that detached his retina.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does seem like the UFC are sort of behind getting Bisping to a title shot. You just saw it in the post-fight interview, John Anik asking him about it, and obviously a lot of his questions coming from his earpiece, which come from the production truck. So, yeah, it's very interesting to see what's going to happen next. I think if the opportunity is there, there's no doubt about it to me that the UFC are really going to try and put Michael Bisping in that spot. I guess as a thank you to everything that he's done for the company and knowing that, he is a bit older and who knows how many fights he has left. But there you guys go. It was a crazy night. Anything else that we missed, Cass? Anything else that we need to talk about? Or have we wrapped this thing up in a bow?
I think the bow's there, the sparkler's there, and we're on our way to deliver the presents. So we're done with UFC London, and I think we need to talk about UFC 196 and all the craziness that happened, mid to late last week. What's the first thing that we're going to talk about? Obviously, RDA pulled out. Everybody was distraught. We were in tears. We were sitting there with the cliche box of ice cream, the Haagen-Dazs, sobbing, watching Bridget Jones's Diary, hating our lives because RDA pulled out. But in my opinion, right, and I'm just going to cut straight into it because a lot of people are giving RDA crap. A lot of Conor McGregor fans are saying that he needs to. Well, they're saying a lot of nice things, right? A lot of not nice things, and saying that he needs to harden up and basically take the fight. And they're echoing what Conor McGregor says about it being a bruise, etc. Listen, this isn't 2005 where it's a tough man contest. If you really want to see the best fight the best, then let them be their best. If you really want to see the real Conor McGregor versus RDA, and if you are a Conor McGregor fan and you want to see Conor McGregor win that belt and beat the true champion, well then let RDA heal up. Let him heal up, let him be at his best so that, if he does win, then obviously there'll be no excuses. Because personally, I'm enjoying this whole ride and everything that's happening, but I want to see Conor McGregor beat a healthy RDA if he's going to beat him, which to be honest, I don't know that he will, but I don't know. I just think the people are being a bit harsh on RDA. What do you think, Dennis?
Oh, absolutely. I think people are forgetting the fact that when he fought Anthony Pettis, his knee was torn to shreds, still went into that fight and won. I mean, there's no doubt about it to me that RDA is a tough SOB. And if he's pulling out because of a serious injury where it's actually going to affect the fight, I don't think anybody could be critical to him. At the end of the day, these fighters, they could get to a certain point where if the injury is going to affect their performance to the degree that RDA believes it would affect his performance, then it's absolutely his right to pull out. And I think people need to be a bit more understanding. I think in usual circumstances, they would be. But, with McGregor talking about how it's a bruise, almost anything that he says, a lot of people do sort of believe. But, we had a look at the photos. We saw some of the reports. And the foot is very, very difficult because, as most people know, you need to have your balance. You need to be able to throw kicks. You need to be able to stop takedowns. And a guy like McGregor, obviously, he's going in with a dodgy knee, much like RDA. But I really do believe that RDA was at a point where he thought, look, there's not much I can do with this injury.
And there's a lot of, it's a broken foot. There's a lot of people saying that fighters fight with injuries all the time. Wear and tear, not a broken foot. It's not, guys go in there with, little things that have been nagging them for years, not a broken foot. And just look at what happened to Chris Weidman. He tried to be tough, he fought with a broken foot, and now he's known as the former middleweight champion. So, when there's so much at stake, not only a title and your legacy, but obviously the bragging rights that come with it between RDA and Conor McGregor, I 100% understand RDA pulling out. And honestly, I'm with Verdum for pulling out against Stipe Miocic, considering that he was training for a certain guy, a certain style, and that style went out the window, and him being an older champion decided, you know what, it's not worth it. If I lose the title, I can potentially be nothing, and that's a huge U-turn in my career. So I'm all for, I'm not for RDA pulling out. As a fan, I hate it. I can't stand it. It was terrible news to wake up to, but I understand it. And just another thing I want to sort of touch on, people think that RDA pulled out because he was scared. He gains absolutely nothing from pulling out. Nothing. At least if he fought and lost, he'd make a lot of money. Right? It's his biggest payday today. You think he didn't want this fight to happen? If he didn't want this fight, and if all these people that are saying that RDA is scared, if your theory is true, let's suspend disbelief and believe that it is. The time to avoid this fight was before the contract was signed. Don't forget, odds makers had RDA as the favorite. So people who think RDA chickened out, I think that's a ridiculous theory.
Oh, yeah, certainly right. And I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to it affects them so much on a level that fans don't realize in terms of pay, in terms of their future, in terms of what happens to them next. And RDA worked so hard to get to the title. I think he deserves to fight with a chance. Now, jumping to the next topic of discussion, I mean, some people were a little bit confused as to why the UFC chose Nate Diaz over Cowboy Cerrone. Jump to you first, Cass. What did you think of the decision? Was it the right one?
I think Nate was the better choice. I think, between him and Cerrone, it's kind of a wash. Like, there's pros and cons to both of them. I think that Nate's the more dangerous fighter stylistically, and he obviously beat Cerrone, but Cerrone would be the more in-shape fighter at the moment. He just fought, 2 weeks ago, and he's ranked higher. So I think it's kind of like much of muchness. Both fights have stories and rivalries behind them that would be marketable, but I think easily Nate Diaz way more so. And at the end of the day, it's the fight that people wanted to see. If they gave him Cerrone, I think it would have been the same thing. People would have been saying, "Oh, he's ducking Nate Diaz. Cerrone's the easier fight because Nate beat him," etc., etc. The other thing is, we know Cowboy notoriously struggles in high pressure situations and big fights, and none would be bigger than this. So I definitely think Nate was the better choice. What do you think, Dennis?
Yeah, I agree with you on all those points. And then if you have Cerrone lose again, I think the UFC really depends on Cerrone to main event some of these smaller fight night cards, and they sort of put him up against maybe not the best competition, but they sort of put him up against someone and he knocks them out or submits them. So he's someone who's a pretty important piece of the puzzle to the UFC, and then maybe they looked at it from the decision, like you mentioned, he does choke in these big situations. But the other thing is, and it's obvious, like you mentioned, Nate Diaz, the bigger fight, no doubt, no question.
And the other thing is, when Rafael Dos Anjos fought Nate, he beat him via decision. If Conor can finish him, and I've got Conor in this fight, I think the odds are really stacked against Nate, right? But if Conor can finish him, he does something that RDA couldn't do, and it adds a lot more intrigue to a possible future matchup between him and RDA. So, the other thing is, I really like that the fight is at 170 because it gives Nate leeway and accommodates for the fact that he may not be in optimal shape. I mean, he's not going to be in optimal shape, but at least it's at 170. He doesn't have to worry about cutting weight. The other thing is Eddie Alvarez. He was also another possibility, but there's no story there between him and Conor. And
That'd be a terrible fight, I think, as well. There's a real good possibility Alvarez would just put him down and just try and grind out a victory. And then that doesn't really help anyone. I think, it kills one of the biggest stars in the sport, and it doesn't really help many people.
And there's no demand for that fight. Look, listen, I'm not saying no one wants to see it, but you compare Eddie Alvarez to a Nate Diaz fight or even a Cerrone fight, let's not pretend. Both fights are bigger, and I'd say Nate Diaz is by far the bigger fight. So
I mean, if they were going for someone out of the other category, it would have to be Anthony Pettis over Alvarez, because at least Anthony Pettis would go in there and strike with him, whereas Eddie, it's just not there.
I will say though, right, at some point, you just got to have to respect that Conor's willing to fight pretty much anyone that the UFC
Yes.
offered. I really do. Not to mention at 170, which is 2 weight classes above his previous fighting weight. It's pretty crazy, unprecedented. I mean, imagine a bantamweight fighting a featherweight at lightweight, plus 5 pounds. So a lot of respect to Conor for taking the fight.
It's unbelievable. I think this whole situation is just giving me so much more respect for Conor McGregor, because at the end of the day, he says what he says, but most fighters won't do that. They won't just go up, like you mentioned, a couple of weight classes. And Dana White was doing the interview where he mentioned that just like the stuff that he says to the media when they're on the phone, he's exactly the same. And I mean, this really proves that this is a second coming of Chuck Liddell. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's unprecedented because there's millions and millions of dollars involved, and you got a guy going up 2 weight classes willing to fight anyone. It's really refreshing to watch. I mean, I really don't think it's something anyone else should be really doing. I mean, it's a huge, huge risk, but it's great to see a guy believe in himself so much and in his fighting skills so much that he's willing to do it, especially in these days. Like you mentioned, we see so many guys pulling out.
Yeah, and listen, I was very reserved about Conor McGregor when he first came onto the scene and came into the UFC and talked about how he was going to kill the division and things like that. I was like, all right, well, this is different. This is pretty rough. And I wasn't at all anti-Conor McGregor, but like I'm not like some people who are just, you know, Conor McGregor fanatics and nut huggers. I have, for lack of a better term, I can't call them anything else. But man, listen, the guy's entertaining, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for him jumping up 2 weight classes. I mean, like you mentioned, it's just not something that happens in the UFC in any weight class. Like I said, bantamweight fighting a featherweight at lightweight, you just don't see it. I don't want to start naming names and imagine this guy doing that, because it's not fair, because maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't, but it's crazy. The other options talked about were Khabib Nurmagomedov or Tony Ferguson. What do you think about those guys as potential possibilities, and why they weren't, you know, even chosen?
Would have been just a waste of talent, I think. You know, you got these 2 guys there. It's going to be an amazing matchup between both of them. I think Dana White also mentioned that they already gave that fight to Fox. I'm not sure how that all works, but I think in the contract that they have with Fox, you know, once they give them a fight, it sort of stays on Fox. But the thing is, this is a fight where a big star is going to emerge. And I mean, Khabib is already a very well-known fighter and someone who's supposed to fight for the title. And Tony Ferguson is also an up-and-coming talent that everybody's really excited to watch. Let those guys fight each other and let a new star emerge. It's all about building new stars in the division, because you never know what's going to happen, how many injuries, who's going to fall out, who's going to test positive for what's going to happen. So I'm all for these guys having a great fight, building a new star, and creating another contender in the division. I just don't see why you just throw them into the fire with Conor McGregor. Maybe they win, or maybe they don't. Either way, I think you lose on the potential of having another big star sort of in the wings waiting to fight. What about you, Cass?
Yeah, and I think, you mentioned the contenders. I don't think it's even about the star. I just think, well, because if you fight Conor McGregor, you stand a chance of becoming a bigger star. But I think it's more about the fact that there may be future contenders. Yeah. So whoever wins that fight will have the biggest argument for a title shot, Khabib or Tony, right? And they could be facing, you know, RDA or Conor. I mean, obviously it's going to be RDA now. I don't know. It just depends how they rebook it. But, right, if you, hypothetically, right, if one of them loses to Conor and the other loses to a late replacement, let's say you give Conor Khabib, Conor beats him, and then Tony faces someone, maybe Alvarez, and then you've just flushed Tony down the toilet and you've flushed Khabib down the toilet. Now you've got Alvarez, but now you've got one contender. I don't know. I'm all for keeping them on Fox. I don't know about those rules about, you know, when you sign something to Fox, because I do feel like they may have been a few fights switched around. Maybe it's just Dana White being a promoter. Maybe it's true. But as far as future contenders, I think it's much smarter to let those guys fight it out.
Yeah, certainly. Now, a lot of people sort of not sure what happened because Jose Aldo and Frankie Edgar were offered the fight. Obviously, Jose said that he'll fight Conor anytime, anywhere, even if it's not for a belt. Your reaction when you found out those 2 guys passing the fight?
Listen, so first of all, Edgar's injured. He's got a groin injury, and a lot of people are saying, "Oh, is he really injured? Is he not?" Dwayne Finley, who writes for Bleacher Report, he does a lot of stuff. Actually, he does a lot of stuff based on obviously stories and interviews fighters, and does a lot of fun pieces and has like a lot of video content and things like that. Really tries to get to know the fighters. That's what he's all about. He was going to do something with Edgar. He can't. I don't say Dwayne flies under the radar, but he's just kind of like an untapped gold mine. And Edgar was kind of like his next project. He was going to do stuff with him, and Edgar actually cancelled or pushed that back a little bit even before any of this was mentioned. So he said how it's a legitimate injury because obviously he cancelled on him. So Edgar does have a pulled groin, or something to do with his groin. I think it's a pulled groin. So I can understand Edgar saying no. This is probably going to be his only shot at fighting McGregor, and he wants to be in 100% shape, much like RDA. So if he loses, and it's on 2 weeks' notice, forget what kind of shape he's in. If he loses to McGregor, I don't think the UFC really want Edgar beating McGregor, and if he does lose on a short notice fight, he's not going to get a rematch anytime soon. Aldo, kind of the same thing. So with Jose Aldo, and I tweeted straight away, I'm really glad that he didn't take the fight, because it's the same thing. If he gets a rematch with Conor McGregor, and he loses on 2 weeks' notice, he's probably never getting a rematch again because, the marketing-wise and Conor McGregor and the UFC can say, look, he got his rematch, he lost twice definitively. And even from a marketing perspective, it's hard to market that fight. Like, if Aldo loses or if he gets knocked out again or something, not only that, but he just got knocked out in December. One of the things about that UFC 196 press conference with Conor and Nate, a lot of people laughed, but when he was talking about fighters having head trauma and damage and being on the shelf for a while, that's very real. And with Jose Aldo, I wouldn't want to see him get back in the cage against Conor. It's not necessarily because I don't think he can't beat him, because I had Aldo winning that fight when they first fought, but he just got knocked out. For once, I agree with Conor. He does need to sit on the shelf and recover. It's just the only unfortunate thing about Aldo is that he did say anytime, anywhere, even if it's not for a belt. So he did say that. That was his line, and then he pulled out. So, in a lot of ways, the egg is on his face. But honestly, if Aldo and Conor fight, I don't want to see it at lightweight. I want to see it at featherweight. Let Aldo have another fight for a title if he's even going to get that fight. You know how we feel about rematches. If he's going to get a fight, let it be at featherweight for the belt. I don't want to see it at lightweight. What's the point? There's no point.
Yeah, certainly. And you hit the nail on the head. I mean, if he was KO'd in December and took a break, I mean, he probably wasn't able to really spar anything just till recently, or maybe he's not allowed to spar yet. And we all saw what happened to TJ Grant. I mean, he's still not back after that concussion and training. So who knows where he's at? I mean, if his coach says he's out of shape, he could be out of shape in the sense that he hasn't actually been to the gym since December. So who knows what's going on there? But there has been a consensus cast, and John Kavanagh saying that fighters should be staying ready and alert when Conor fights just in case his opponent pulls out. I just want to quickly say on that note that from a fan's perspective, we think that all fighters do is fight and train, but they also have a life outside of fighting, and they have families and commitments and businesses and things going on in their life which don't always let them stay in 100% peak shape. So even though we'd like to think that fighters are ready, it's not their responsibility to be ready for when Conor fights. Sure, if you're smart and you want to try and make the most of the opportunity, you might be able to train, but you might be injured. There might be something going on in your life. To us, we think fighters, all they do is fight, but they have a lot of stuff going on in their lives, much like all of us do. Imagine if somebody told you, all right, go out there and do a presentation in your work tomorrow. You got an opportunity in front of the CEO. You haven't even begun putting anything together. Of course you'd say no because you're not able to do it. And it's not because you didn't want to do it. It's because personally you just didn't have the time to put it together. So a lot of these fighters, I'm sure they'd love to fight Conor McGregor, but they just haven't had an opportunity to stay fight ready all year long. It's a luxury. A lot of these guys work part-time. A lot of these guys have to do other things outside of fighting. What about you, Cass? What do you think about John Kavanagh's consensus?
Well, just like your example about if your boss or someone says, hey, we need you to fill in for this presentation in front of the CEO, it's a huge opportunity. It's the big wig, it's the big boss. If he sees it and it's good, you may be getting a promotion or something. You're right. A lot of people would say, no, I don't have the time. But then there are people who would say, all right, I'll do it. And then the presentation sucks. And people are like, why did it suck? And you say, well, I didn't have much time. It was short notice. And then a lot of fans, this is all hypothetical, would say, oh, but you accepted it, so you shouldn't be giving excuses, which I think is the most ridiculous thing in the world. I'm going to take a detour and I'll get back and answer your question. There's a lot of fans who say things like, if you take a fight on short notice, you forfeit the excuse. I saw this. You forfeit the excuse that you weren't 100%. The only people who can use that excuse are people who took fights on short notice. When have you ever heard someone who's got like a 3-4 month training camp or whatever, 2-month training camp saying, oh, I took it on short notice? You don't get to use that excuse, but if you take a fight on short notice, it's not an excuse. That's just reality. That's a fact. I mean, it's something that It bothers me when people say like, oh, you can't use that as an excuse. So it's not an excuse. It's just something you have to take into consideration. It's not, the fighter shouldn't even say. You should realize where they did take it. Like, listen, I think Conor's going to beat Nate Diaz, right? That's my opinion. And I think even if Nate was 100%, I think stylistically it's a good fight. But you got to factor in that, you know, if Nate gets destroyed, you could potentially say, well, I mean, look, he was in terrible shape. And even whether it affects the fight or doesn't affect the fight, in a fighter's mind, that's what they believe, that they weren't in optimal shape. Anyway, going back to your question about John Kavanagh, I think I understand what he's saying and I understand that mindset, but not in a literal sense, right? If you've got 364, 365 days in a year, you can't be ready for that. Fighters say the worst part about fighting is dieting, cutting weight, and the actual training camp itself. And there's a reason why training camps only go for, you know, between 8 to 12 weeks. You would burn out if you train all year long. When fighters train in the off season, it's like, yeah, they're going to the gym. They're going and just kind of, in a sense, having fun. They'll do like a BJJ class and they're just kind of learning new things. You know, they're rolling, they're not going 100%, or they'll do a striking class, they're not going 100%. They may be going, you know, once every day or once, you know, during the work week, but they're not going 3 times every day during the off season. If you do that all year long, you're going to burn out, and obviously it's going to lead to more injuries. It's going to lead to more fighters pulling out of fights, and it's going to lead to all fights, not all, but a lot of fights getting ruined. So I don't agree with that that ideology, that thought process that, well, when Conor fights, everybody should be getting ready. Listen, if you want to get ready, by all means, but I think fans expect it a little too literally. Like, yeah, you're right. The whole division should be on notice. It's not their job. And if they get called, and, you know, to say, hey, it's like if you work at any job and your boss calls you and says, hey, can you cover a shift? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But if you can't, no hard feelings. Why? Because you weren't rostered on. It's not your job. And people say fighting's different. It is, but it isn't. You respect the fighters that go out and say, hey, I'll take a fight on short notice, but I don't think you can look down on any fighters that don't.
Yeah, absolutely. And also like the luxury of staying ready, because sort of fighters do plan to fight in certain parts of the year. Maybe their wife's having a baby. Maybe the family has to make sacrifices in order for them to be able to go to training a certain times a day because they've got to drop off the kids and pick them up. It's a whole bunch of different reasons. But one of the other things I have to say is this is fighting. This isn't bowling. This isn't gardening. You know, this isn't basketball. This is fighting. This is someone throwing a fist at your head. And if you're not ready for someone throwing a fist at your head, I think you have the right to say no, because there are some consequences that can happen, and some fighters pay a whole lifetime from one single shot. So this is fighting. This is serious business. This isn't a game of soccer.
Not only that, but it costs money to stay in shape. Like, I can't stress that going to the gym regularly and having regular training sessions, it's not the same as being in a very full-on intense training camp where all you're doing is training multiple times, 2 to 3 times, 5 or 6 days out of the week. It costs money, and if you don't get that fight, if Conor's opponent doesn't pull out, then you've just wasted a whole bunch of money, and you wasted a whole bunch of your time, and you can't peak all year long. You can peak every now and then. And if you do peak after, say, 8 weeks or 2, and that's the thing, training camps are designed so that you peak at a certain point, so you peak on a certain date. And if you don't have a certain date in mind, you can't just, I don't know, I think it's a ridiculous thing to ask fighters. Really, anyone who takes fights on short notice, a lot of respect to them. Sometimes there's unfortunate consequences for taking fights on short notice, but you just can't look down on fighters if they either say no or if they're not ready. It's crazy how RDA pulls out, and it's all of a sudden everybody else's fault that they're all pussies because they don't want to take this fight. Ridiculous. So respect for Conor for being a sport about it and saying he'll fight whoever, and respect to Nate Diaz for taking the fight.
And the final thing I sort of do want to talk about is this whole Holly Holm versus Miesha Tate fight not being the main event of the card. Now, there's been a bit of talk about this from fans and, over the internet about why isn't this the main event of the evening? This is a title fight. And to that, I have to say that it doesn't matter what title fight this was going to be. It could be any weight class. This isn't a female thing. People are tuning into this card because of McGregor and Nate Diaz. And it's nothing like disrespect or anything towards Holly or Miesha. It's just that they genuinely, and this is going to sound a bit crazy, but for people that aren't hardcore MMA fans, the casual fans, I reckon about 60, 70% of them don't even realize what are the fights underneath the McGregor-Nate Diaz fight. So it's nothing against Holm or Tate or them being women. It's just the fact that this is, without a shadow of a doubt, the draw for the event. This is why people are tuning in. This is the main event. And you can't put that in the co-main event spot. I think the UFC did the right thing. What do you think, Cass?
Well, nothing's been announced, and I think at this point we've sort of passed the stage where they would announce it, but I'm just really glad they didn't do an interim title, because that would have been the most ridiculous thing. You've got RDA, and at one point, the UFC and Dana White was saying they haven't ruled it out. I think now the door's closed, but you've got RDA who fought, 2 months ago? He fought at the end of December, and we're now end of Feb, start of March, so that's 2 months. There is no reason for an interim title. And then what? Let's say Nate Diaz beats Conor McGregor. He's now an interim title holder and he's going to fight RDA. I think it'd be the dumbest thing to give an interim title. Huge disrespect to RDA. Huge disrespect to, obviously, the belt that he carries. And there's just no reason for it. You said, that you don't need... I think at this point, everybody accepts the fact that Conor's a huge draw, that he's a huge star. You don't need to give an interim title fight as an excuse to have them in the main event. It's okay. Let them be in the main event. Everybody understands. Whoever is in the main event gets the most promotion, and they build the card around that. And of course, they're going to do that around Conor McGregor. So I'm fine with Misha and Holly staying as the co-main event. That's a fight that stayed so under the radar. I'm not saying no one's talking about it, but I find myself forgetting that fight is on the card. I'm looking forward to it, but let's be honest, the main event, the main course, so to speak, Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz. I have no issues with them being in the main event.
And what a great spot for Holly Holm to be in, because now, obviously, she beat Ronda Rousey. All the casual fans saw her around the world. She did a huge media tour, and now you're going to have a huge amount of people watching this card. Don't realize Holly Holm is on it, and realize, oh, wait, this is the girl that beat Ronda Rousey, and if she has another big win, it's going to be another huge mainstream win for her, because the world will be watching. So great spot to be in for Holly Holm.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's pretty much it. I think we've touched on almost every single topic that there is to touch on. If we haven't, we'll touch on them next week when we're going to be doing a UFC 196 special. Dennis, you want to explain to the fans and everybody listening how that's going to work?
Yeah, well, once in a while, fans that listen to the show weekly will know that we do a special where we get a whole bunch of different perspectives into an episode. So we'll have one or two journalists on the program. We're going to be talking about the event, talking about the details of the event, the main event, obviously Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz, but also whatever's happening towards the event, anything that's going to be happening in the media leading into it. There's going to be a whole bunch of fun stuff, and it's all going to be centered on UFC 196. The idea behind it is you're going to get it all. It's a one-stop shop for opinion when it comes to everything to do with the event, and we can't wait to do it, because every time we do it, it's always fun. We've had guys like Tommy Toehold, Dave Meltzer, Elias Cepeda, Kareem Zidane, just a bunch of different media, I suppose you can say, superstars on the program. So this one will be no different. We're going to get the who's who when it comes to opinions in MMA, and we're going to be breaking it down here.
Yeah, Tommy Toehold, last time we did a UFC 194 special, he stopped by just to do a bit and then he left. It was perfect. So it's what you want from Tommy Toehold. So we'll see who we get next week. It's going to be a whole bunch of fun, whole bunch of shenanigans. Big thank you to you for listening. Obviously, we rambled for quite a long time. We get mixed feedback. Some people say we love the interviews, we want longer interviews. Why are they so short? Some people say, the interviews are great and all, but we really sort of look forward to listening to you guys ramble. Look, whatever. It's like the little taco girl in the old El Paso ads. Best of both worlds. Why not have both? So we rambled for quite a while. We covered quite a bit of stuff. So if you're still listening, we appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking the time. Don't forget, chuck some reviews up on iTunes. You can follow us on Twitter at SubmissionAUS, Facebook, Submission Radio AUS as well, I believe. SoundCloud, iTunes, we're on everywhere, and we'll catch you next week.